It's quiet here now, the kind of stillness that wraps around me like a warm, soft blanket. The faint hum of the refrigerator is the only sound breaking through the silence of my little house, where time seems to stand still since he's been gone. I can still smell the hints of cedar from the shelves he built himself, and the lingering notes of his favorite musk that never quite left the fabric of our couch. Sometimes I close my eyes and pretend he's just in the next room, tinkering with a project, or maybe flipping through pages of a dog-eared novel before bedtime. My name is Clara, and I've been living in our home for the better part of a decade. It was supposed to be our forever place, a cozy nest built on love and laughter. But since losing Andrew, things have changed, and I've noticed how people see me now, like the light has dimmed around me, like I've turned into someone unrecognizable. I'm the woman they whisper about at the grocery store or nod at with pity when I catch their eye. I didn't ask for it, but feelings have a way of spilling over, and I'm still trying to navigate a jagged edge of grief that just won't seem to heal. It's hard to explain to folks who drop by unannounced, to my well-meaning friends who think I should let go of his things, that every sweater and book still carries a fragment of him, an echo of our shared life. Each item in this house is a memory, a story, and in some small way, a way to keep him alive. They're not mere belongings to me, they're pieces of my heart wrapped in fabric and ink. And when I stand before that wooden chest he carved with his own hands, a lump forms in my throat, and I feel the weight of their concerned stares. I just think it's time to move on, one of them said gently the other day, her voice soft like the pillow I bury my face in at night when loneliness creeps back in. Maybe she didn't mean it to sting, but it felt like a reminder that I was stuck, frozen in a moment they seemed to have passed. How could they understand that sharing his things feels like sharing my memories, my love? Each step further away from those remnants feels like a step away from him. As the evening deepens and the shadows grow longer, I sit here in the quiet, tracing my fingers over the spines of his books and wishing for a spark of the old warmth to return. It's not about being cold, no, it's a tenderness that refuses to part with the past. Sometimes, in this silence, I find solace in stories, in sharing my thoughts here, hoping that someone, somewhere could understand a heart like mine. The inciting event slipped into my life like an unexpected chill, that moment when I realized I was not just clinging to memories but was creating a barrier around my heart. It was last weekend, a small gathering of friends who had come to check in on me, offering what they thought was support. I truly appreciated their efforts, but I wasn't quite prepared for the discussion that unfolded. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the room, laughter bubbled up and buzzed in the air. It felt almost normal, a moment where joy reminded me of simpler times. But then, after a few glasses of wine and a hesitant nudge from Sarah, my well-meaning friend who always seemed to know just the right question to ask, they started talking about their own home decluttering projects. It was lighthearted at first, sharing tips on what to keep and what to let go of, but then Sarah turned to me, her eyes softened with concern, and said, "You know, it might help to go through some of James's things. It's probably time." Those words landed like a heavy stone in my chest, and the light in the room dimmed, even as laughter continued around us. Time? I hadn't even begun to wrap my heart around the idea that time could glide past something so precious. It felt fresh, the loss still wrapped around me like a thick blanket I could hardly shake off. Every book on the shelf, every piece of clothing hanging in the closet, whispered stories and memories I wasn't ready to silence. "Oh, it's not that easy," I said, the tremor in my voice cutting through the festive atmosphere. There was an awkward pause, a silence that felt like a collective intake of breath, as they shifted in their seats. I realized then that my words had cast an unexpected shadow. I wasn't just disagreeing with Sarah, I was drawing a line that they couldn't see, one that set me apart from the circle of their understanding and healing. The looks exchanged among my friends revealed a growing concern. Some nodded, murmuring soft assurances, while others glanced down awkwardly, unsure of how to navigate my frozen state. I wanted to tell them it felt less cold-hearted and more like treasuring the warmth of what used to be. But instead, I just pressed my lips together and forced a smile that felt far too fragile. In that moment, I understood, like a clear bell ringing through the fog, that refusing to share his belongings often meant refusing to let others fully reach me, and yet, how could they possibly hold the weight of what I carried? I was a guardian of our memories, fiercely protecting the essence of love that still lingered in every corner of my home. As the evening wrapped up and I saw the understanding fading from their eyes, I felt like I was 2 steps away from the warmth of companionship, moving closer into solitude rather than deeper into connection. It was a challenging realization, one I wasn't quite ready to face. The days after the dinner, the realization clung to me like an old, faded sweater. Each morning, I would wake with an ache that seemed to settle in my bones, a quiet reminder of the days that had unfurled so quickly yet felt so achingly slow since Sam's passing. It was strange, how I could miss him more with every tick of the clock, every sip of tea. The familiar ritual of morning light spilling through the kitchen window, casting patterns on the tiles, felt like a mocking reminder of the daylight we would never share again. At first, I stayed busy. I organized his old records, stacked them neatly on the shelves, dusted off the vinyl covers, the ones that still bore his handwritten notes on the back, words of affection wrapped in the tones of his voice. I thought I was honoring him, reminiscing, preserving the echoes of our shared laughter and whispered dreams. Yet, as I organized, I could almost hear the soft, echoing murmur of my friends' voices in the back of my mind, telling me to share these pieces of him, to let others see the beauty of our life together. The more I tried to push away these thoughts, the louder they became, resonating like a haunting tune I couldn't ignore. My evenings turned into silent battles, as I sifted through boxes filled with memories, his favorite shirt, a weathered baseball cap, even the books he loved to read curled up on the couch beside me. I would hold each item, my fingers trembling over the fabric and the print. It felt impossible to reconcile the drive to protect these remnants of our love with the growing loneliness that seeped into my heart like an unwelcome chill. I found myself telling little white lies to friends who offered to come by and help me out. "Oh, I'm fine really. Just organizing things around here." As they left, I felt the door close on something deeper. With every dismissal, I was threading a barrier around my heart, but oh, how comforting that barrier felt, like a well-worn blanket shielding me from the outside world. Still, I couldn't shake the sensation of solitude wrapping around me, tighter with each passing moment. One afternoon, as I stood in front of a closet overflowing with Sam's clothes, I caught my reflection in the mirror, and for a brief flicker, I didn't recognize myself. The shadows under my eyes seemed to tell a story of loneliness I didn't want to unfold. I was the girl with the beautiful memories, yet I felt like a ghost wandering through the echo of love we had built together. I placed my hand over my heart and asked myself, was I really protecting those memories, or was I inadvertently building walls to hold the world at bay? It wasn't long before the silence became my closest companion. Even the simplest things, picking out groceries, curling up on a Sunday afternoon with a book, felt weightier without him beside me. I would look at couples in the park, sharing laughter, intertwined, and a dull ache would spread across my chest. I was missing an essential piece, the one who shared the sunrises and the quiet moments, but I was also becoming increasingly aware of my own tightening grip on the past. Some nights, after hours spent in contemplation, I sat on the edge of our bed, his side untouched, the sheets still smelling faintly of him. I would hold on to a shirt that belonged to him, my fingers running over the fabric as if trying to imprint the essence of him into my being. What a beautiful, yet heartbreaking ritual it was, a testament to however fleeting our time together felt. Then came a gentle invitation from my best friend, Emma. "Let's do something, just us two," she suggested in a voice light with hope. And my instinct was to resist, to retreat back into the cocoon of solitude I had so carefully woven. But a quiet part of me, a fragment nudging at the edges of my protective shell, whispered that maybe, just maybe, I could unlock a door instead of building more walls. So, I agreed, not without hesitation, but I said yes nonetheless. As I prepared to meet her, moments played back in my mind, flickers of laughter at shared dinners, the jolt of happiness at unexpected hugs. I sighed deeply, feeling the weight of those countless memories, reminders that connection could be a precursor to pain, yet it also held the promise for moments of joy. I thought of my late husband and realized that even in his absence, perhaps there was still a way forward, a gentle expansion of the heart, waiting quietly for its turn to heal. As I sit here, reflecting on the choices I've made and the path I've walked since losing him, I realize how much I had clung to the relics of my past. It was like holding onto a lifeline, the few tangible pieces of my husband scattered throughout our home, each one a reminder of laughter, love, and warmth. I thought by refusing to part with his things, I was preserving our shared memories, encasing myself in a sanctuary where the pain couldn't quite reach me. But as I prepare to meet her, the woman who expressed so much empathy and understanding, I feel something shift within me. I can hear my husband's voice in the back of my mind, encouraging me to embrace life, to let in the light I had been so fiercely guarding against. I'm starting to understand that my refusal to let go wasn't just about keeping his memory alive, it was also about fearing the unknown, the vulnerability of opening my heart to new experiences and connections. The tension that wrapped around the thoughts of sharing his belongings is slowly loosening. I'm beginning to see that the love we had is not confined to material things. It lives in my heart, in the moments we created together, and now, it has the potential to flourish in new spaces. That heaviness I felt, the coldness others described? It was simply my heart protecting itself from what felt like an unbearable loss. I've long viewed my grief as a shield, something impenetrable, but tonight, I see it more like a tapestry, beautifully intricate yet undeniably fragile. As I untangle the threads of sorrow and joy, I am piecing together a different vision of myself, one that acknowledges the deep ache of loss but also the strength of resilience. Deciding to share his things doesn't mean I am letting go of him. Instead, it's an embrace of the love he left behind and an invitation for new memories to take root. If I can learn to celebrate what we had, without fearing what might come next, I may find that my heart isn't cold after all. It's merely been waiting for the right moment to warm again, to expand, much like a blossom seeking the sun after a long winter. So, maybe I will share. Maybe I will find joy in knowing that his belongings can create warmth in someone else's life, just as they once did in mine. And with these thoughts, I take a deep breath, feeling the shift within me, a quiet resolve growing alongside the comforting echoes of the past, heralding a new beginning. The day was unseasonably warm for late autumn, the kind of day that often comes as a surprise. Bright sunlight blanketed my small living room, casting playful shadows against the walls. As I sat surrounded by my husband's things, his well-loved guitar propped against the wall, his well-worn sneakers casually tossed aside, the collection of books we've both cherished, I felt the familiar weights pressing down on my chest. They felt heavier today, enveloped in a thick blanket of sorrow. But then, something shifted. I let my eyes linger on his guitar, the one he strummed while we laughed under the stars, when the moonlight danced through our window and the world seemed to melt away. A wave of memory washed over me, his smile flickering like candlelight, the way he would lean into the music, lost in it, inviting me into a moment of pure joy. Those memories had always been my refuge, but today, they suggested something new. I rose from the couch and slowly walked to the guitar, fingers brushing against its smooth wood. I remembered how he often said that music was meant to be shared, a language that could bridge any distance. In that moment, I realized that holding onto his belongings with a clenched fist wasn't honoring his memory, it was shading it in shadows. Taking a deep breath, I closed my eyes, feeling the warmth of the sun streaming through the window. I imagined his laughter echoing beyond these walls, infusing life into the silence around me. I thought of someone out there, a kid with dreams of becoming a musician, a friend needing a spark of inspiration, anyone who could find comfort in the warmth of those things once held dear. So, in a small but significant act, I reached down and picked up the guitar, cradling it gently. The strings had grown dusty, but I could almost hear the notes still lingering. I made my way to the corner of the room where I had created a little nook, a shrine of sorts filled with memories, and gently placed the guitar down next to his favorite books. It was a small gesture, but in that moment, it felt monumental. I could feel the tension release, the heaviness in my heart lightening just a little. I opened my eyes, and there, in the sunlight, I found a smile creeping onto my lips. I whispered a quiet promise to him, a sacred vow to find joy in the act of sharing, his laughter, his light, his passion, transforming my pain into a canvas for new memories to paint themselves upon. And in that quiet moment of clarity, I let the sun pour in, unpacking the heartache just enough to allow a bit of warmth to seep back in. I wasn't cold after all, I was simply allowing space for love to breathe again. Outcome as the days flowed into weeks, something beautiful started to blossom in my heart. Gradually, that little nook I had created wasn't just a shrine. It became a gathering place filled with the whispers of old stories and the warmth of cherished memories. Friends began to stop by, drawn by the flickering light that seemed to beckon them in. They brought laughter, reminiscences, and even a few spontaneous jam sessions with his guitar that had once sat silently, filled only with echoes of the past. I remember the first time we strummed together. The notes hung in the air like fragile bubbles, delicate and shimmering with every stroke. As we played, I felt my husband's spirit dancing in the rhythm, a gentle reminder that love doesn't end, it simply transforms. It was a sweet surrender to joy that cracked the shell of my coldness, piece by piece, each strum letting a little more light shine through. I also found comfort in volunteering at the local community center, where I discovered a group of people who were wrestling with their own losses. I shared my journey, my reluctance to let go and how I learned to embrace the joy of sharing, and it resonated deeply with them. In those moments of connection, I understood that I wasn't alone, nor was my love just a relic of the past, it was a living testament that continued to touch lives. There were whispers from a few who couldn't grasp my choices, casting me as the cold widow who hoarded memories like treasures. But their words lost power as I surrounded myself with those who understood. I chose to treasure my husband's spirit, not in the hoarding of belongings but in the giving of myself, the sharing of our story, our laughter, and the love that remained like a thread weaving through all our lives. With each passing day, I embraced the impermanence of life, feeling less like a silhouette shadowed by grief and more like a beacon of hope reverberating love. The space I created was no longer a barrier, but a bridge, connecting us through shared love, shared memories, and the acceptance that joy and sorrow can exist simultaneously. So, as autumn painted the leaves in hues of gold and crimson, I learned to cherish the warmth of the sunshine that seeped into the corners of my heart. I let go, not of my husband, but of the fear and the coldness that had clung to me. Instead, I cradled every note, every shared moment, and every new experience that emerged, transforming grief into a beautiful tapestry of living life with an open heart. And that, I found, was more than enough. As the days grew shorter and the nights wrapped me in a calm embrace, I realized that love doesn't fade, it evolves. The things I held on to became treasures of the past, but it was in the present where I could truly honor his memory. By letting the sunshine in, I discovered that grief can be a gentle companion, guiding us toward a deeper understanding of joy. In that delicate balance, I learned, to love well is to live well, even amidst the shadows of loss. You know those nights when the world outside feels like a comforting blanket, wrapping you in silence, and all you hear is the gentle hum of your own thoughts? That's how it feels right now as I sit here, nestled in the corner of my living room. The soft glow of the lamp casts a warm light over the bookshelves that line the walls, filled with stories I've collected over the years, each spine a memory waiting to be shared. Outside, I can hear the distant serenade of crickets, a reminder that life moves on, even in the stillness of night. I'm Emily, a 30-something living in a modest two-bedroom apartment. To many, it might seem small, but to me, it's a sanctuary. The scent of vanilla candles lingers in the air, mixing with the faint aroma of fresh coffee, a ritual I cherish each morning as I sip from my chipped but beloved mug. My cozy home has always been a place I've been proud to create, a labor of love filled with plants, soft fabrics, and little trinkets from my travels. It felt like my personal fortress, a space where I could let my guard down and simply breathe. But then there's Jake, my younger brother, who recently found himself in need of a place to land. Life had thrown him a few curveballs. So, with a heart that sometimes struggles to say no, I offered him my spare room. I thought it would be temporary, a helping hand until he got back on his feet. And, in theory, it was a decision made with love, fueled by memories of late-night talks and laughter-filled summers. But what I didn't foresee was how, in that simple act of kindness, the dynamics of our relationship would begin to shift. The familiar, laid-back rhythm of my home started to change. The laughter soon felt different, almost like a distant echo, overshadowed by Jake's newfound sense of entitlement that seemed to spring up as soon as he crossed the threshold. It's funny how swiftly things can spiral, isn't it? One moment, you're sharing secrets over takeout, and the next, you're left wondering if you've invited a stranger to live in your heart's haven. So, as I sit here, listening to the soft rustle of the night, I find myself reflecting on the delicate balance of family and personal space, questioning if it was worth it, or if love was meant to be expressed with a little more caution. Because in opening my door, I may have also opened a can of worms, or perhaps a perfect storm of brotherly dynamics that I hadn't anticipated. I hope you'll join me on this journey, as I sift through the laughter and the tension, in search of that shared bond that once felt unbreakable. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon when the inciting moment found me, completely unprepared. I was just finishing up a long day at work, my head still buzzing with emails and deadlines, when I heard the unmistakable sound of my brother rummaging through the kitchen. The door had barely closed behind him before I could hear him muttering to himself, likely scanning the shelves for snacks. I remember walking in, a bit weary, and instinctively expecting to be met with a friendly smile or maybe even a joke about how I should hide my cinnamon rolls better. Instead, I found him deep in the pantry, a casual hand on the doorframe, as though he'd casually moved in. He glanced over at me, eyebrows raised, and said, "You really need to get some better snacks. This is all just sad." At that moment, the warmth I felt transformed into something more complicated. My heart sank just a little. I was tired, and his comment, while not completely out of character, cut at me in a way I didn't expect. After all, I had invited him here to help him through a tough time, some space for him to reset and recharge. But, instead of that familiar breeze of brotherly love, it felt as though he were taking ownership of a place that had always been my sanctuary. For a split second, I almost laughed it off. I reminded myself that it was just him being him, his usual sarcasm peeking through the clutter of the day. But then he began to rummage deeper, grumbling half-heartedly about how he could use a real refrigerator makeover. With each word, my mind swirled, grappling with the notion that perhaps this was not the simple brotherly bond I had imagined rekindling, but instead a shift in our relationship I hadn't anticipated. I stood there, feeling the weight of the moment, my safe space suddenly feeling a tad claustrophobic, marred by his potential ownership of it. Yet, I couldn't help but feel a stir of something warmer, too, a flicker of solidarity, perhaps. Isn't that the tapestry of family life? One moment, a shared joke, the next, the unease of boundaries being tested. So on that rainy Tuesday afternoon, I found myself questioning what it meant to be supportive and what it meant to maintain my own sense of home. I felt a peculiar mix of affection and frustration rise like the steam from the kettle I'd forgotten to turn off, a perfect storm brewing in the most unexpected of ways. Perhaps love, like family, isn't about making everything blissful, sometimes it's about navigating the downpours together, no matter how chaotic. The days slid by quietly, like the slow drip of rainwater from my windowsill, each moment leaving behind a subtle shift in the air. What started as small encroachments on my space morphed slowly, almost imperceptibly, into something more, an uninvited layer of tension threading itself through our days. At first, it was a simple thing, a dish left soaking in the sink, a half-empty soda can casually abandoned on the coffee table. I shrugged it off and vacuumed the living room, trying to shake off that creeping unease. My mind wove a tapestry of thoughts during those mundane chores, each passing moment a brushstroke painting over my initial excitement. I murmured to myself, he's new to this, we'll find a rhythm. But rhythm can easily tip into cacophony. The pattern began to deepen when I noticed how he started claiming space in ways I never expected. The couch became his throne, the remote, his scepter. I'd come home from work, tired and eager for a moment of comfort, only to discover he'd taken my favorite spot, wrapped in a cocoon of blankets, laughter spilling from the screen with an intoxicating warmth that felt both inviting and exclusive. "Oh, I thought you'd gone for the day," he called, blissfully ignorant of the subtle ache spreading through my chest. "Care to join?" As I sank into my own chair, distant and removed, a small voice weaved through my thoughts, this was my space first. I tried to shake it off, reminding myself that family means sharing, but a strange knot tightened in my stomach. Each evening felt less like homecoming and more like an awkward visit, teetering on the edge of a polite smile. By the end of that week, I found myself slipping into the solace of solitude more often. When he'd step into the kitchen to rustle up something adventurous for dinner, I'd excuse myself to the balcony, cradling a mug of chamomile tea, my one personal retreat. I found comfort in the chatter of the wind through the trees, the way it danced like a gentle reminder that I still had my own whispers in this shared life. What if you just sat with him? I'd ask myself, the question hanging in the air as I watched shadows from the sunset bathe my palms in gold. What would happen if you reached out? Yet I hesitated, feeling a curious heaviness instead of the buoyancy I once felt. Each laugh echoing from the kitchen heightened that strange disconnect between us, like two players missing the rhythm of an old song. I found reflections of our relationship swirling within my own head, where I tossed around the clutter of affections mixed with irritation, trying to strike the right balance. The weekends arrived far too quickly, beckoning with the shimmering brightness of lazy days. I'd planned for a cozy Saturday, a morning ritual of coffee and quiet reading, but he had other plans. "Let's throw a little barbecue," he declared, bright eyes radiating excitement. Before I even had a chance to register, he'd whipped up a guest list, spreading his anchor further into my territory. I felt an unexpected surge of anxiety, an uninvited guest at my own gathering. At that moment, standing in my kitchen while he juggled a plate of marinated chicken, I caught a glimpse of myself in the reflection of the window, a tense pose creased across my brow. The laughter of my friends filled the air just outside, a gentle reminder of the warmth I once cherished, now overshadowed by a swell of unease. "You'll regret this," my mind warned. "You'll lose your space, your serenity." And yet, why was it so complicated? As I stared into my now familiar reflection, I wondered if there was a lesson here, the eternal give and take of understanding, the push and pull of loving someone while still grasping for your own peace. Perhaps in all this, the true challenge was weaving together our lives without losing the essence of mine. So, as the barbecue unfolded and laughter swirled around us, I took a deep breath, letting the hearty sense of summer fill my lungs, hoping that chaos could blend into something beautiful. As I glanced at my brother, fully engulfed in delight as he charred the chicken to perfection, I whispered to myself, maybe we can learn to coexist, to make room for each other. But in my heart, the question lingered, blooming quietly in the corners of my mind. Would that be enough? As I sat there, reflecting on the chaotic yet oddly harmonious gathering, I began to realize something profound about myself. I've always prided myself on my independence, crafting my own space, my own rules. Every corner of my home was a carefully curated piece of me, a sanctuary built to shield my thoughts and dreams from the outside world. But here was my brother, unafraid to fill that space with his laughter and bold personality, and it scared me a bit at first. His presence was a tumble of mixed feelings, annoyance, joy, frustration, and warmth, all rolled into one. But somewhere between flipping burgers and scanning the sky for the first inklings of twilight, I started seeing things through a new lens. Perhaps I hadn't just let him move in, I had opened a door. And yes, doors can lead to loud conversations, shared meals, and sometimes messy disagreements, but they can also open to beautiful moments I never knew I was missing. It's like I've been living in a monochrome world, dutifully coloring within the lines, and now my brother was splattering vibrant paint across the canvas of my life. His brashness and boldness, which once felt overwhelming, now began to feel like a challenge to me. What if I leaned into this discomfort? What if embracing his messiness could bring rich layers to my own carefully painted life? It dawned on me that perhaps the real ownership in any relationship is not about claiming territory, but about the capacity to share both burden and joy. While I may have built the house, it was clear that family was what truly made it a home. As I watched him, joyfully engaged in our makeshift summer feast, I realized that love is rarely about convenience. It's a messy dance of negotiation, boundary setting, and yes, sometimes, a bit of compromise. I began to understand that balancing my need for space with his need for belonging is a delicate art, an art that could lead to discovering a version of myself that is both anchored and free. In that moment, I let go of my apprehension. It wasn't about whether he was taking over, but rather about what we could build together. I remembered, no one thrives in isolation. So, maybe this was exactly what I needed, a chance to learn how to coexist, to blend the different strokes of our personalities into something uniquely us. The question no longer felt daunting, instead, it shimmered with promise. Would it be enough? In time, I began to hope that together, we could find a way to enrich each other's lives, carving out a space where love, chaos, and laughter intertwined, creating something far more meaningful than I ever could have anticipated. The moment arrived quietly, like the gentle exhale after a long day. I was sitting on the couch, its cushions slightly indented from our shared moments, those evenings we'd spent binge-watching our favorite shows and debating over the best movie villains. The air held a hint of popcorn and old memories, a mix that always felt warm and comforting. It was then, while absent-mindedly flipping through a book, that I suddenly noticed the little things around me, the artwork on the walls we'd picked out together, the mismatched cushions that somehow complemented each other, and the familiar comfort of being home. As I looked up, I saw my brother in the kitchen, rummaging through the fridge, his laughter spilling out as he joked about being the new head chef. Instead of feeling annoyed, I felt a flicker of something different, a sense of belonging. He didn't just act like he owned the place, he was breathing life into the spaces we'd once overlooked, filling our shared home with new memories. That's when clarity washed over me. I didn't have to relinquish control or push back against what felt like intrusion. Instead, I could invite him in, welcoming not only his presence but also the new vibrancy he brought along with him. It wasn't about ownership or boundaries, but about redefining what family meant, an extension of love, trust, and shared moments. I took a deep breath, feeling lighter. The decision crystallized within me. I would talk to him, openly and kindly, about how we could navigate this new chapter together. We could set some boundaries and find compromise without it feeling like a battle. I would remind him that this home was ours, a canvas yet to be painted with the rich hues of our lives intertwined. With that resolution nestled safely in my heart, I smiled, thinking of the cook-off we could have, our own chaotic version of a culinary showdown. Messy and joyful, full of laughter over spilled ingredients and friendly banter. This was my cue, a new beginning for us both. As I set my book down and walked to the kitchen, I felt like I was stepping into the light, ready to embrace whatever unfolded next. Outcome: the days following our conversation unfolded gently like the pages of a beloved book. It felt as though we were both holding our breath, waiting to see if the words we spoke would settle softly between us or echo uncomfortably in the corners of our shared space. As I approached my brother one evening with an idea for the cook-off, the tension melted away into laughter. We decided on themes. Taco Tuesday soon morphed into an all-out taco fiesta where we both donned ridiculous sombreros. Flour flew everywhere as tortillas transformed into the base for our culinary creations. I watched him step out of his self-imposed limits as he playfully debated guacamole recipes, creating a rhythm in the kitchen that felt like a dance. Each moment reminded me of our childhood, when we would build intricate fortresses out of blankets, each corner a shared secret. Setting boundaries became an act of creation rather than a confrontation. We agreed on times for quiet, understanding the need for personal space amidst our harmony. He learned to appreciate the little things, respecting the order of my book collection on the shelf or waiting for me before launching into their latest gaming obsession. In turn, I learned to embrace the commotion he brought, finding warmth in our chaotic kitchen and joy in the unexpected burst of his laughter. Weeks slipped by, and it became clearer that our home was indeed a canvas waiting to be painted anew. I believe what surprised us both was how our bond deepened through these adjustments. Our routine emerged as a comforting rhythm, a little dance of compromise and support. We took turns preparing dinner and planned weekly movie nights, often enjoying the simply woven fabric of our lives together, savoring those still moments shared over popcorn and jokes. And while he still had moments of forgetting the uncanny nature of living under someone's roof, it was now met with gentle reminders instead of frustration. "Hey, my book collection is not a jungle gym, buddy." I'd laugh, and he'd grin sheepishly, even offering to help reorganize it. We found a balance that felt just right. There were little twinges of bittersweet nostalgia when I recalled the days before he moved in, my island of solitude against his noisiness. But it was the laughter that lingered, the warmth of companionship I'd craved but didn't know. Our home had morphed into a sanctuary, a blend of personalities, and the once lonesome space now echoed with the richness of life's shared moments. In the quiet hours before bed, as we exchanged quirky anecdotes from our days, I found a deep sense of gratitude for this path we had wandered together. So, while my brother may have seemed to think he owned the place at times, in reality, we were simply co-curators of a beautiful, vibrant narrative. A story full of mishaps, laughter, and the kind of love that only deepens when shared in the everyday. Sometimes, that's the most precious thing we could ask for. In the end, I realized that sharing a space is so much more than just dividing rooms. It's about merging lives, teaching each other how to be a little more ourselves. After all, isn't it the beautiful mess of togetherness that truly makes a house feel like home? You know those quiet moments late at night, when the world feels wrapped in a soft blanket of solitude. That's when I find myself reflecting on the little things that sometimes weigh heavily on my heart. My name is Jamie, and though I lead a relatively ordinary life in a bustling neighborhood, it's in those hushed hours that the ordinary takes on a feeling of soft complexity. The glow of my laptop flickered gently in the dim light of my living room, casting shadows that danced on the walls as if they were part of some secret ballet. It smelled faintly of lavender and popcorn, my comforting ritual every Friday night as I settled into my small but cozy sofa. There's a break in the monotony of the week, a pause where I can let my mind wander, forgetting the demands of work and the whirlwind of the day-to-day. Surrounding me are the echoes of family, both near and far. My younger brother, Matt, lives just a few streets away. He might as well be my soulmate in mischief, sharing everything from inside jokes to lazy Sunday afternoons on the couch, binging our latest obsessions. My sister, Lucy, who moved to the city for her art career, often drifts in and out of my life like a breath of fresh air. Her vivacious spirit sometimes adds a chaotic flair to my peaceful existence, and it's in those moments of spontaneity that I find both joy and frustration. Then there are my parents, who reside in a quaint little house on the edge of town. Their love is a familiar warmth, the steady hum of home that makes the deepest part of me feel anchored. Yet, even amid that closeness, there's this unspoken understanding that each of us has our own space, our own boundaries, even with something as simple as sharing a Netflix password. But, as life often does, things took a turn that nudged those boundaries a little too far for my comfort. It seemed innocent enough at first, a casual request, a harmless borrowing of my Netflix account. But soon after, I found myself staring at the screen, a sinking feeling in my stomach as I unearthed the telltale signs of a binge session I never signed up for. How could something so trivial feel like a breach of trust? It stirred a gentle, disquieting ache in my chest that crept in during those quiet moments. So, as I sat cross-legged on the sofa, cocooned in a world of soft pillows and flickering lights, I made a choice, an impulsive moment of resolve. I'd change the password. And why? Well, it was less about the Netflix account and more about the principle of it all, a quiet assertion of my own needs in a world that so often overlooked them. It was a small act of self-affirmation in an otherwise chaotic life, a way to reclaim the little space that felt so precious to me. As the night deepened, I looked out the window at the stars twinkling like tiny promises in the blanket of the sky. I could almost feel the weight lift, even as my heart wrestled with the thought of how this would probably change things with Matt. But perhaps, just perhaps, it was necessary. It was a Tuesday evening when it all began. The day had slipped through my fingers like sand, each hour packed with the usual flurry of errands and tasks. I was finally settling down, yearning for a slice of peace after the whirlwind of it all. After a long day at work, all I craved was to sink into my cozy routine, to lose myself in the gentle embrace of my favorite show. As I picked up the remote, I pressed the familiar buttons, feeling the warmth of the sofa wrap around me. My heart fluttered in anticipation. But then, instead of the familiar opening theme, I was met with a logging screen that felt colder than winter. Incorrect password, it read in star-quiet letters against a dark background. I blinked a few times, trying to shake off the confusion. Maybe I had just mistyped it? I tried again, and desperation began to creep in with each failed attempt. I could feel my cozy cocoon turning into a tight knot in my stomach. Just then, my phone buzzed, breaking the stillness. It was a text from Matt. "Hey! Just borrowed your Netflix for a bit, hope that's okay." Of course, Matt had borrowed it. Like he had so many times before, without asking. I paused, reading the message over and over, letting the words sink in. A cocktail of emotions brewed inside me, frustration, disappointment, and, oddly, a flavor of sadness. Why couldn't he see that this small sanctuary was special to me? It wasn't just about my Netflix account, it represented little moments of retreat from the world that I cherish so much. I glanced back at the screen, the dark void staring back at me, a poignant reminder that I was feeling dismissed in my own home. In that moment, something shifted. It felt like the universe was whispering that it was time to stand up for the things that mattered most to me, even if they seemed small in the grand tapestry of life. So instead of surrendering to anger or resentment, I turned my resolve inward. I breathed deeply, quieting the tumult of my feelings. I decided I would change the password. It seemed so small, so quiet, yet I knew it carried a weight beyond its simplicity. It wasn't merely about preventing someone from using my Netflix, it was about creating a boundary, perhaps an invitation to be seen and respected. As the stars twinkled outside my window, I felt a gentle determination wash over me. Here in my little bubble, I was reminded that asserting myself, even in the smallest ways, was not only okay, it was necessary. The next morning, I awoke to sunlight streaming through the curtains, casting soft patterns on the walls of my cozy room. I felt lighter, as if the simple act of changing my password had unburdened me in ways I hadn't fully realized. There was a sprinkle of hope in my chest, and I held on to it like a fragile treasure. Yet, as I sat sipping my morning coffee, sweet and rich, my mind wandered back to the Netflix situation. Would they notice it was gone? Part of me was curious, and the other part of me was almost eager for the interaction that would follow. I imagined the conversation, meticulously crafting lines in my mind like a playwright rehearsing the poignant moments of the scene. It would be brief, I told myself, just a quick chat where I'd calmly explain my need for privacy. Days passed, each filled with the routine rhythm of life, work, chores, the soothing embrace of my favorite shows at night. I took walks in the crisp autumn air, the leaves crackling beneath my feet, and drank herbal tea while curled into a warm blanket. Still, an undercurrent of anxiety brushed against the corners of my peaceful moments, a gentle reminder of the thing left unaddressed. Then came the inevitable. One quiet evening, as I plopped down on the couch, ready to dive into a new series, my phone buzzed with a text from my brother. "Hey, I noticed I can't log into Netflix anymore. Did we get kicked off or something?" Embarrassed smiley face emoji. My heart quickened, an amalgamation of nerves and anticipation. I paused, biting my lip. Did I respond playfully, in a way that would soften the blow? Or did I face him directly, a bit more serious this time? After a few moments, I settled on a gentle honesty, a simple reply that mirrored the warmth of my coffee cup. "Hey! I changed the password. Needed to carve out some borders for myself, you know?" The seconds stretched like hours as I waited for his response. And when it came, it felt like a sigh of relief in the form of a words. "Totally get it. I'll respect that. No worries. Do you want to plan a movie night soon?" I felt a rush of warmth. There was no anger, no defensiveness, just understanding. The boundaries I had drawn didn't lead to estrangement, instead, they opened up a conversation I didn't know I craved. My heart uncoiled a little more as I realized I had expressed my needs clearly without tearing down the foundations of companionship. In the days that followed, I became more attuned to the small things, the way my brother checked in more frequently, how our conversations held a newfound openness. I found that standing up for myself didn't cast shadows, but rather shed light on the space we shared, allowing both of us to navigate with greater understanding. I began to embrace more of my own needs in subtle ways. I adapted my schedule to include quiet time, to read and meditate, and to dream leisurely of my next artistic project. The world felt softer, the colors brighter. I smiled at the oddity of it all. Who knew a streaming service would be a catalyst for so much introspection? And on those peaceful nights when silence wrapped around me like a comforting blanket, I realized how that small act of asserting myself had rippled outwards, carving deeper channels of respect and love in my relationships. It was a gentle reminder that rising in small ways could lead to greater connections. All I had to do was nurture the courage to speak my truth, and from those quiet moments, a life filled with soft, rich joys could flourish. In the weeks following the decision to change my Netflix password, I found myself in a quiet dialogue with my thoughts. At first, it felt like a petty act, like an overreaction to a minor breach of my personal space. But as I sat with the implications of it, the words unspooled deeper truths. It wasn't really about the password, it was about boundaries. I began to see how often I pushed my feelings aside, letting them slip into the background, like a game I never really wanted to play. With each passing day, as I engaged more in self-care and mindful moments, I noticed something beautiful growing inside me: clarity. I realized that I had often equated love with self-sacrifice, thinking that giving up my needs for others would somehow make me more worthy of their affection. But, slowly, I started to understand that real love, at least the kind that lasts, thrives on mutual respect. I was learning that it's okay to want space, to ask for consideration, and yes, sometimes, to claim small territories that were mine alone. The more I reflected on this, the more it made me appreciate the people who respected my boundaries willingly. It helped me redefine my relationships, both with others and with myself. I began to notice the gentle lift of joy that came from asking for help or even saying no when my heart whispered it was too much. I felt a newfound strength in my voice, a soft but steady rhythm that resonated with authenticity. Then one evening, as I brewed my favorite cup of tea, I found myself smiling at the quiet house around me. This space was mine, filled with the echoes of my choices and dreams. I thought about my friends and family who had reacted kindly when I told them what I needed. It dawned on me that taking that stand had encouraged them to voice their own desires too. It was contagious, this ripple effect of honesty and openness. I no longer felt the heavy weight of resentment that had followed me through unspoken conversations. Instead, I felt lighter, like a mist lifting with the dawn. I recognized that cultivating my own space didn't subtract from others, it added richness to every shared moment. Even as I navigated life with its ups and downs, there was an understanding now, an acceptance of both my vulnerabilities and strengths. In time, I learned that standing my ground is a kind of love, too. It wasn't about being standoffish or selfish, it was about ensuring that my heart had the room to grow, to explore, to weave stories worthy of the time they took to unfold. Those nights of solitude had introduced me to the depth of my own desires, and I knew I'd never return to a place of self-neglect. Assertiveness was my ally now, opening doors to deeper connections built on genuine respect. So, as I tucked myself into bed that night, a gentle smile rested upon my lips. I drifted slowly into dreams filled with laughter and shared moments, knowing now that the sweetest stories emerge when we honor both ourselves and one another. And how, ultimately, that little act changing a password had unlocked so much more than a streaming service. It had ushered in a softer, braver me. As I lay there, cocooned in the soft embrace of my blankets, I let the day's events wash over me like a gentle tide. The small victory of taking charge felt monumental, like a quiet rebellion against the remnants of people-pleasing that had colored so much of my life. Each breath I took began to lighten the weight I hadn't even fully acknowledged was there. I remembered the way my heart had raced when I first realized my Netflix account had been used without my consent. It felt like a betrayal, but in hindsight, it wasn't just about the TV shows. It was more about the message it sent, the silent implication that someone thought they could take from me without asking. In that moment, however small, I knew I was capable of reclaiming my boundaries, and that was where the real beauty lay. With this fresh wave of clarity, I turned my focus inward. I thought of all the times I'd held back, the moments where my voice wavered just a little too much, where my hopes were tucked away just a bit too quickly. This shift, this small act of saying no to an assumption, had transformed into a delicate affirmation of my worth. I was allowed to want things for myself, to draw lines and stand by them. As I nestled deeper into the sheets, I realized that this wasn't just about a password. It was a refreshing step into a new narrative, one where I could assert my needs without guilt. A gentle breeze blew through my window, rustling the curtains, and it felt as if the universe was whispering that it was okay to embrace this newfound clarity. In this space of tranquility, I felt lighter. I took a moment to breathe deeply, letting this wave of realization wash over me, soothing any lingering doubt. Yes, I could be kind and still stand firm. I could let love in, but only on terms that respected the space I needed to flourish. I smiled again, imagining how empowering it would feel to share these lessons with others, friends who might still be caught in the web of self-doubt. That night, as sleep began to pull me under, I closed my eyes with gratitude. It felt like awakening to a part of myself that had been dormant for too long. On the other side of that small change was a version of me fully alive, ready to embrace not just the stories of others but my own story, written with every choice I made. I drifted off, cradled by the gentle rhythm of my breath, knowing that this journey was just beginning. The days that followed were surprisingly serene. The muted glow of my laptop became less about the latest binge-worthy series and more about the delicate act of choosing what mattered to me. I had changed my Netflix password, and in so doing, I carved out a tiny fortress of peace around my screen space. When my friends discovered they could no longer access my account, the reactions varied. Some were bemused, a couple slightly annoyed, but most simply laughed it off. I could hear their teasing in my mind, and here I thought you were the generous one. But underneath that playful banter lay an understanding that I had drawn a line, infused with self-respect. Without the distraction of scrolling through familiar shows on repeat, I turned my gaze inward. I found myself rediscovering old hobbies, unearthing dusty books, and even venturing into the realm of writing. My evenings transformed from passive consumption to active creation, and the joy I had once lost began to ripple back into my life. Juxtaposed against the silence of my night, I penned my thoughts into a journal, exploring themes of boundary setting and self-care. I noticed a gradual shift in my friendships too. The little decision to prioritize my own space inspired a dialogue about personal limits, an unspoken agreement that sometimes it was okay to just take a step back. Conversations deepened. My friends began to share their own struggles with similar concerns, revealing that my mere act of reclaiming my Netflix had sparked something bigger. One evening, a few of my close friends gathered at my place. With a pot of tea warming on the stove and the soft hum of a playlist filling the space, we talked, really talked. I nestled into the vibrant energy of their laughter, feeling more connected than I had in a long time. It wasn't just about the shows we couldn't watch together anymore, it was so much more profound than that. It was about recognizing our individual stories and honoring them, weaving them together in a tapestry of shared experiences. In time, we agreed to take turns hosting movie nights, merging the old with the new. We still enjoyed those shared moments, but now there was an intoxicating blend of autonomy and companionship. I felt a warm sense of belonging, a softness in the air as we navigated life's ups and downs together. As I lay in bed after those evenings, I took a moment to breathe in the soft glow of the moonlight peeking through my window. I knew now that standing firm in my choices didn't push people away, rather, it drew them closer in unexpected ways. I drifted off again, filled with gratitude. It was a serene acceptance of my journey, a dance between solitude and friendship, between boundaries and love. Quietly, I smiled, knowing that every small decision had led me deeper into a life that was truly my own. And as I settled into the quiet of my room, I realized that sometimes, setting boundaries isn't just about keeping people out, it can be about inviting them in more authentically. In the gentle ebb and flow of connection, we find a way to honor ourselves while still sharing warmth with others. I still remember the way the evening light curled through the kitchen window that day, casting soft shadows over the old wooden table that had seen just about every family gathering imaginable. My mind had been a flurry of thoughts, a kaleidoscope of emotions swirling around as I listened to the gentle chatter of my family preparing for my dad's retirement party. It was supposed to be a celebration, a grand finale of sorts after 35 years with the same company. The aroma of roasted chicken mingled with the sweet fragrance of blooming lilacs from the garden, lifting my spirits while sending a pang of guilt through me. I'm Mia, the youngest in the family, a title I always wore with a mix of pride and an undercurrent of expectation. At 26, I still felt that youthful innocence clinging to me, but life had a way of complicating things. Standing on the edge of adulthood often left me lost, fumbling with my own choices. My dad was everything to me, patient, a constant source of warmth with a laugh that could fill a room. My mom was lovingly fussing in the kitchen, humming to herself, the kind of melody that wrapped around you like a blanket. My older brother Jake, with his quick jokes and easy smiles, was hanging up a banner that said Happy Retirement. In bright, bold letters, and I could feel the love radiating from all around me. But there was a storm brewing within me. As everyone buzzed around, preparing speeches and making memories, I sat at the table, leaves turning golden outside the window, wrestling with a decision I knew would change everything. I couldn't shake the feeling that being there, in that moment, would mean giving in to expectations, sitting pretty in the role I'd always played. I had reservations about what I would say, how my presence might ripple through the air, weighing it down with unspoken words that hovered like static electricity. So, when the time came, I made a choice that felt right to me but would carry the weight of disappointment in its wake. I skipped the party, thinking I was protecting myself, misjudging the turmoil I would unleash. Even the sound of my dad's laughter echoing in the distance felt like a distant chime, one I would have to confront later in face of my family's confusion and hurt. Now, reflecting back on that evening, I realize it wasn't just about the party or the people, it was about my dance with fear and uncertainty, which left shadows in every corner of my heart. It was one of those crisp autumn evenings, the kind where leaves crackle underfoot and the air carries a hint of nostalgia. I could practically hear my dad's excitement bubbling in the background when he first mentioned the retirement party. "Just a small gathering with everyone, nothing fancy," he said, as if trying to ease me into the idea. But I knew it was anything but small to him. This was a milestone, a moment where recognition and love would wrap around him like a warm blanket. But as the date drew closer, the butterflies in my stomach started to feel like hornets. I couldn't shake the feeling that standing in that room, surrounded by family and friends, would ignite a firestorm of feelings I'd barely begun to unpack. My dad deserved all the celebration, but I could see their expectant faces and imagined their questions. "Why haven't you been around? What's changed?" The night before the party, anxiety twisted my stomach, and in an attempt to soothe the dread, I convinced myself that it was best to stay home, to wrap myself in my own cocoon of safety. After all, there's only so much emotional vulnerability one can handle at a time, right? I thought that sitting quietly with a book and a cup of tea would be better than risking tears or awkward conversations. As I settled into my decision, I envisioned my dad smiling, raising a toast to the future while his friends laughed and shared stories. I imagined his genuine joy intertwining with a touch of bittersweetness, the irony that he was stepping into this new chapter while I remained stuck in my own muddled pages. My fingers tapped nervously against the coffee table, and I hoped that my choice wouldn't ripple out too far, that maybe, just maybe, it would be a blip that no one would notice. However, as the clock struck the hour and I nestled deeper into the quiet of my living room, the warmth of my cocoon only highlighted the distance growing between my heart and my family. I could hear a distant party hum through the phone in my pocket, a text from my sister announcing we were all gathered and that Dad was over the moon, and suddenly, guilt washed over me like a wave. I hesitated, my heart pounding, but made no move to reply. In that moment, everything shifted. I chose solitude over connection, and it felt like the world beyond my walls turned a little colder, leaving me cocooned but so achingly isolated. The decision settled like a stone in my chest, heavier with each passing second, an unwelcome reminder of the chasm I had just opened up in my family's narrative. As the hours slipped by, the laughter and clinking of glasses wafted in from my phone, filling the silence in my living room with reminders of what I had chosen to forego. I sat there, wrapped in a blanket, scrolling through images of smiling faces and gleaming decorations. Dad was the center of it all, beaming amidst friends and family, and I could almost hear his laughter swirling in the breeze, vibrant and alive. A twinge of regret gripped my heart, but I hastily suppressed it, focusing instead on the flicker of candlelight dancing on the coffee table. Why had I skipped the party? I'd spent weeks building that internal fortress, steeped in my own battles against the chaos outside. It wasn't just about the retirement party, it was about the thudding insecurity echoing in my mind. But in choosing to wrap myself in the comforts of my own space, I hadn't realized I would be stitching a deeper rift, one that tightened with every tick of the clock. Days later, as I pulled myself through the mundanity of my routine, coffee brews and morning jogs, I felt the weight of the unspoken words filling the spaces in my life. I'd shuffle around town, the grocery store buzzing with chatter, and each happy family reminded me of the void I had intentionally created. I noticed replays of the party in my mind, the pictures my sister shared, the comments from family members, all laced with joy that felt painfully out of reach. I was living a different story, one that no longer included their laughter. The guilt swirled around me, a desperate reminder that I might have sacrificed something precious on the altar of self-preservation. Even evenings spent cozied up with my favorite books seemed dimmer. I flicked through the pages mechanically, hardly absorbing the words. Each chapter ended in me returning to my own reality, where my heart felt a little less light, each page a small ticking clock, marking the passage of time lost with my family. During one quiet afternoon, while contemplating whether I should finally pick up the phone and make that call, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in a mirror. The dark circles under my eyes seemed deeper, betraying the sleepless nights filled with back-and-forth dialogues in my head. I chastised myself. Who had I become that I would let a single night ripple out into this expanse of loneliness? I knew the fault lay with me, yet, the choice to reach out felt monumental, like stepping onto a tightrope stretched so thin that one misstep could send me tumbling into a pit of silence. But I also recognized, perched quietly in the back of my mind, a waning light of acceptance. I would need to confront this guilt soon. After all, I had loved him, loved them all, from the depths of my soul, even overshadowed by my own battles. In the evenings, I'd settle into my chair, soft jazz lulling me into reflection, pondering how it felt to place my hand on my father's shoulder and how his smile would crinkle warmly as he shared stories. Those idyllic moments lived in stark contrast to my growing solitude. I couldn't shake the feeling that, without taking action, I drew closer to what felt like a long goodbye. If I didn't make peace with this inner turmoil, the gradual unraveling of our bond might become permanent, a reality that tightened around my chest even more than the decision to stay home. And as I stared out at the fading daylight, I saw the same warm hues that painted the backdrop of celebration. I was haunted by the idea that the next chance to weave myself back into the fabric of my family might slip through my fingers like sand. And so I lingered, caught between two worlds, my body in that familiar cocoon while my heart yearned to belong. Each day enthralled in the gentle tug-of-war felt like both a weight and a lighter breeze, like a warm sigh waiting for an open window. I was still here, alive, wanting to find my way through the clutter of my choices and back to them. It was time to consider, perhaps, the beauty and vulnerability and the strength in rebuilding the connection I so dearly missed. As I sat there, the twilight softly deepening around me, a wave of awareness washed over me, one that I hadn't fully embraced before. I started to truly grasp the weight of my decision, the reality I had chosen over the imagined ease of staying away. It wasn't just about skipping a party, it was about skipping a chance for healing, for understanding, and for letting my family in, even when it felt profoundly uncomfortable. In that moment, I realized I had taken refuge in my solitude, crafting a cocoon of safety around myself. I'd convinced myself that it was easier to remain on the fringes, to avoid the awkward conversations and well-meaning but stilted apologies. But as I gazed into the dimming light, I could see the shadows of my family, each one a different color, a personal struggle, and an undeniable love. I saw their faces, decked in joy and nostalgia, gathering to honor tenacity and time tested in the crucible of life. I thought about my dad, standing there among those he inspired, filled with pride and perhaps a little uncertainty of what lay ahead. What must it feel like to look back at your life's work and know it is worthy of a celebration? How could I miss a moment when I could have been part of that joy? Yet, more importantly, how could I close myself off from sharing my feelings in a space that could open more if only I stepped into it? As the last glow of day slipped away, an inner shift surfaced. I began to realize that vulnerability wasn't a weakness, it was the first thread in weaving back those ties I so longed for. By isolating myself, I was not simply protecting my heart, I was building walls that kept my family out and me entrenched in my fears. This wasn't just about regret, it became a lesson in the real meaning of connection, one that thrives in honesty and openness, even when the truth feels raw. And so, I made a pact with myself. The next time I felt that tightening grip of anxiety or fear, I wouldn't retreat into solitude, instead, I'd lean into the discomfort. I vowed to find ways to express my love, to share my stories, and even to admit the struggles that left me breathless. I could feel the promise of renewal blooming somewhere deep inside, like the sweet scent of grass after a long rain. In that reflecting moment, bathed in the soft glow of my room, I found my own sense of belonging within the ebb and flow of family dynamics. I would not allow the fear of the past to dictate my present, rather, I would embrace the chaos, the messiness, and the potential for a richer connection. Tomorrow, the resolve would guide me to them, knowing that being seen and sharing my truth would lead to the warmth I longed for all along. As I sat there, overwhelmed by the weight of my decision, a strange sense of clarity began to wash over me. It was as if a gentle tide was pulling away the clutter of worry and self-doubt that had built up in my chest, leaving behind only the raw essence of my feelings. I remembered my dad's laughter, that infectious kind that made the walls of our home shake, and how he always said, "Life's too short to hold hard feelings." Those words echoed in my mind like a comforting lullaby. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, letting the scent of lavender from the diffuser fill my lungs. It had long been a reminder of home, a safe place where I could be imperfectly me. I pictured the gathering that night, my father standing proudly in front of his friends and family, basking in the love and applause he so deserved. My absence must have felt like a gaping hole in a beautiful tapestry. And I realized, for the first time, that I wasn't just hiding from the party, I was hiding from him, from us. I would no longer silence my feelings or hide in my room like a startled bird. Instead, I envisioned stepping through that door, embracing my family with open arms, and letting the love I felt wrap around me like a warm blanket. It didn't matter that I had missed the initial celebration, what mattered was the connection I could begin anew, even if it felt slightly out of reach now. Tomorrow, I would call him. I'd explain, no excuses, just heart. I would let him know that I loved him deeply and that it would take some time for me to feel comfortable amidst the chatter and cheer, but that I was on my way back. In that moment of mental clarity, I chose to step into the light, ready to face the potential discomfort. My heart yearned for the laughter and stories we could share, for the love that felt suffocated but was ever present and ready to flourish. With that realization, a gentle smile crept across my face, and I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Tomorrow would be the first step towards healing, a step I'd finally dare to take. The next morning, the sun broke through my window, casting warmth throughout my little room, just the kind of light I needed. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight in my chest slowly lift, and dialed my dad's number. The ringing seemed to stretch forever, and every beat felt like a small reminder of all the words I could say but hadn't yet found the courage to utter. When he finally picked up, I could hear the surprise in his voice. "Hey, kiddo. How's it going?" I hesitated, the lump in my throat returning, but I pressed on. I told him I was sorry for not being at the retirement party, how I had let my anxiety overshadow my love for him. I poured out my heart, expressing how proud I was of him, how much he meant to me, and how I couldn't have been more thrilled for this new chapter in his life. To my relief, instead of anger or disappointment, I was greeted with understanding. "I get it," he said after a moment. "You've always been sensitive, and that's okay. I'm just glad you reached out." My chest tightened, and before I knew it, laughter bubbled up between us. We talked about silly moments from my childhood, stories of his early days at work, and dreams he had for our future. The connection that felt distant returned warmly, knitting the spaces between us back together. This conversation became the first of many. Over the following weeks, I took small steps, first visits filled with laughter over coffee, then longer chats that brought us back to a comfort I thought was lost. We shared meals, memories, and moments of vulnerability that deepened our bond even further. The family's initial disappointment slowly softened into acceptance. They could see how my dad beamed when I walked into a room again, and conversations shifted from anger to gentle encouragement. We were healing, slowly but beautifully. In time, I surprised everyone by organizing a small gathering to celebrate his retirement. It was far less grand than the first event, no ostentatious decorations or extensive guest lists, but it was filled with the things that truly mattered: home-cooked meals, cherished friends, and unfiltered laughter. As Dad and I shared a heartfelt toast, the atmosphere felt like a warm embrace. Looking back, skipping that first party wasn't the end of my connection with my dad, it was just a painful detour. I learned that life is often about the journeys we take, the stumbles we overcome, and the love we choose to nurture along the way. It taught me that vulnerability could lead to closeness and that sometimes, taking a step back can set the stage for a grander reunion. In the months that followed, as seasons shifted and candles burned low, I discovered a softer version of healing, a connection mended with threads of honesty and warmth. Peace settled in my heart, gently reminding me that love never truly fades, it waits patiently for us to find it again, even in the aftermath of missteps. So here I am, holding on to the bittersweet lesson that sometimes, missing a moment can lead us back to an even greater one. In the end, it's not about the celebrations we attend, but the love we nurture in the quiet spaces in between. It's one of those late nights where the world outside whispers softly, the only sounds breaking the stillness are the distant hum of passing cars and the gentle rustle of trees swaying in the evening breeze. I had settled into my favorite nook by the window, a warm blanket wrapped around me like a comforting cocoon, as I turned my thoughts inward. My name is Mia, and though I've always tried to be the kind of person who defined herself through the love she gives and the laughter she shares, this past month has found me feeling a bit like a ghost in my own life. You see, just a month ago, I received a promotion at work. The kind you expect to jump up and down about, to share in exaggerated texts filled with gifs and emojis. But instead, I kept the news to myself, hidden away like a cherished secret in a box at the back of my mind. For most of my life, I've surrounded myself with friends who feel like extensions of my heart: Rachel, with her warmth that melts even the coldest of days; Omar, whose laughter can fill a room and my spirit in seconds; and Lucy, my grounding force and constant voice of reason. Our late-night talks often encircled dreams and ambitions, and it felt easy to celebrate these moments together. But as I cupped a mug of chamomile tea, the steam curling up like an embrace, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had somehow slipped into a quieter, shadowy corner of my own world. You could make a compelling case that this change, this promotion, should have sparked a celebration. Instead, I felt a tender reluctance, a fear that maybe, just maybe, they wouldn't see me as I truly am. Perhaps they'd think I was some caricature of success, slipping into a role that didn't fit the essence of the friendship we'd built over years. As days stretched into weeks, whispers of curiosity from my friends snagged on the edges of unspoken words. They started calling me fake, teasing me about being too busy for our usual hangouts. And as I lay here now, weighty silence filling the gaps between our chats, I wonder if I'm the one who built this strange distance. I've kept my joy tucked away, hiding in the shadows. And all I want is to reclaim that light, to bring them back into my world without feeling like a stranger in it. So, here I sit, searching for a way to bridge that chasm I've inadvertently created, wondering how I can share my heart without the fear of rejection. Maybe it's time to let the walls crumble, even if it feels like opening a door on a winter's night. It all started on a Monday afternoon, during what was supposed to be a regular catch-up call with my friend Mia. We'd been talking for years, sharing little bits of life and laughing over the silliest things. You know, the kind of chat that makes you forget about the world outside. But that day felt different. I could feel the buzz in my chest, a mix of excitement and guilt. Just hours before, I had received the email confirming my promotion. Manager of the marketing team, a big deal in our office, something I had been striving for, dreaming of. My heart danced at the thought of the new responsibilities and the acknowledgement of my hard work, yet all I could think about was how to share the news without overshadowing our friendship. When Mia asked how work was going, I hesitated. Should I say it? Should I keep quiet? The words hung in the air, heavy and tangled. And instead of revealing my joy, I casually mentioned a project I was working on, deflecting the moment like a shy bird turning away from the light. The silence that followed felt crushing. I could sense Mia's piercing gaze through the phone, as if she could see right through the facade I had built. You know, you've been pretty quiet lately. It's like you're all wrapped up in something big and are pushing us aside, she said, her tone more curious than confrontational. My cheeks turned warm. I could almost hear the walls closing in. I wanted to reassure her, to say that I hadn't lost interest in our friendship, that I was still the same person. But instead, I offered a light-hearted joke, hoping laughter could smooth over the tension. It didn't. The call ended with a gentle, but distant farewell, echoing in my ears like a gentle warning bell. That was the moment everything shifted for me. The guilt wrapped around my heart like a vine, tightening with each passing day. I had hidden my joy, and in doing so, it felt like I was losing a piece of myself, something vital and warm that reflected our friendship. As I hung up the phone, I felt that chasm between us deepen, and I realized I had inadvertently pulled away from life's little joys, even though I only wanted to share them. It's ironic how keeping something close can set you so far apart. The days following that awkward phone call fluttered by like the autumn leaves outside my window, sometimes bright and beautiful, but mostly feeling frail and darkening. I kept expecting my friends to reach out again, to check in on me as they usually did, but those messages didn't come. Instead, there was this quiet lull, a heavy silence filling the spaces where our conversations used to flow freely. I found myself distracted while scrolling through social media, catching glimpses of my friends' lives, their happy moments so radiant and full of energy, it only deepened the ache in my chest. The photo of Sarah in her new dress, glowing at a recent gathering, Jack's post about his new hiking adventure, surrounded by vast mountains, and Maria's candid snapshot of her and her son, laughing in the backyard. I felt light years away from those moments. It didn't help that I began to notice subtle shifts in my routine. I would make tea for myself after work, for one, and the absence of shared laughter in those quiet moments felt like an echo of something I couldn't quite reach. I would sit on the couch, cradling that warm cup in my hands, longing for company, but my heart felt heavy with the weight of what I hadn't shared. I'd sit in the warmth of the evening, watching TV shows that we'd once enjoyed together, but the joy evaporated, the punchlines felt distant, the humor bland. At work, I'd enter the break room, and for a brief moment the buzz of chatter would lift my spirits, but that fleeting happiness would quickly give way to guilt. I had a wonderful promotion, urging me to celebrate, But instead, I chose to stay quiet. I watched a handful of coworkers share their accomplishments, toasting with coffee mugs, laughter erupting as they recounted their journeys. And there I was, a bystander in my own life, sparing no space for my own success, as if downplaying it would somehow salvage the space between me and my friends. It was in the middle of a particularly dreary Tuesday afternoon, hunched over my desk and surrounded by a flurry of reports, that the thoughts began to spiral. Why did I choose to hide? I wondered, feeling the weight of regret fill every corner. I had once prided myself on authenticity, on being present. I craved connection so deeply, why had I let this shadow of pride creep in and masquerade as humility? It felt wrong, this revelation gnawed at my insides. Every text I didn't send felt like a missed heartbeat, a steady reminder that we used to share so much more. That evening, after another day of wrestling with myself, I leaned against the window, the fading twilight casting gentle colors in the sky, and thought about what I wanted. Connection. Trust. Friendship. I sighed, the heavy fog still lurking but beginning to lift. Maybe I could say something to them. After all, the very pride that kept me quiet was causing the confusion. Maybe it wasn't just about the promotion, but about being seen, being recognized for all versions of myself, both the rising professional and the vulnerable human still navigating life's intricacies. In this gentle battle of emotions, I felt a quiet acceptance wash over me. Life goes on, with an undercurrent of hope. Wouldn't it be soothing to share this piece of my life? I could almost imagine telling them about the promotion, the challenges that led to it, the sheer hard work, and inviting them back into my world, a world where both the successes and struggles could coexist. With those thoughts, I went to bed that night embracing the soft possibility of reconnection. The shadows felt less daunting, and I found comfort in believing that honesty has a way of healing those old cracks. Maybe, just maybe, it was a path worth taking. As I lay there in the quiet of my room, staring at the dim light spilling through the curtains, a shift started to settle within me. I realized I had been operating from a place of fear, a fear of judgment and rejection, an almost paralyzing need to safeguard my vulnerabilities. I thought keeping my promotion to myself could protect me, but in truth, it had only created distance between me and the people I cared about most. I could almost hear their laughter, the way they would have celebrated with me, their genuine happiness lighting up the room. What I once perceived as the fear of losing friends was actually a fear of losing a part of myself, the part that craved connection, authenticity, the messy reality of life. There had been comfort in the shadows, in hiding away my accomplishments, but that comfort was deceptive. Loneliness had wrapped itself around me, whispering sweet nothings about staying small and safe. But there was a warmth stirring within me, an urge to embrace both sides of my life, the triumphant professional and the vulnerable human simply trying to figure it all out. What amazed me most was realizing that my friends had never asked for perfection from me. They didn't need me to wear a facade, they loved me for all my highs and lows. It was like something shifted, and I saw myself reflected in their faces, not as the polished version, but as the real, colorful tapestry I had woven through the years filled with both threads of triumph and the rough edges of struggle. The thought of honesty began to feel like coming home. Maybe sharing my promotion was about more than the achievement itself, it was an invitation for all of us to confront our own insecurities. It could be our chance to connect over the challenges we face every day, to support each other in navigating the messy parts of our lives, even the successes that sometimes feel heavy with expectation. I nestled deeper into my blankets, feeling lighter somehow. I acknowledged that vulnerability might still scare me, but I felt this profound clarity washing over me. The fear of being fake melted away, replaced with the understanding that we are all just trying to find our footing. In embracing my truth, I could invite them into my world, a world where imperfection was not just welcomed but celebrated. I fell asleep that night with a heart full of hope, excited about what reconnection could bring, ready to shine my light as brightly as I could while holding space for the shadows too. The next morning, the sun spilled gently through my curtains, painting familiar patterns on the walls. I lay there, cocooned in a world still waking up. It struck me that I hadn't even had breakfast yet, and I could almost hear the distant laughter of my friends. It was a sweet sound, comforting and close. As I scrolled through my phone, the familiar notification ding chimed in like a jolly little bird, pulling me into the present moment. It started with a group chat message. A video of one of our inside jokes had been shared. I felt the warmth of nostalgia wrap around me, and as I read through everyone's banner, I started picturing their faces, their smiles, the way their eyes lit up when they were genuinely happy. These were people I cared about deeply. They made the mundane bearable, filled my days with laughter and warmth. But then, that creeping doubt returned. What would they think of me now? Sitting up, I felt the heady rush of anxiety. It tightened around me, but beneath it, I sensed something different, an urge to break free. I took a deep breath, feeling the cool air fill my lungs. Suddenly, the thought didn't terrify me like before. What if I just told them? What if I showed them who I really was, all the bits and pieces, the perfectly imperfect jigsaw puzzle of my life? I grabbed my phone and opened the group chat again. My fingers hovered over the screen, hesitant but willing. I felt the warmth of determination blossom within me, as if I had found a soft anchor in the storm of my emotions. All at once, I began typing, a simple message, a heartfelt confession wrapped in vulnerability. Hey everyone, I just wanted to share something with you, a big ol' life update. I got promoted at work this week, and I was so excited at first, but then I felt weird about telling you guys because I didn't want to come off as that person. But you're my friends, and I trust you. It's a mixed bag of emotions, honestly. Looking forward to sharing this journey with you guys. With a quick swipe, I sent it, my heart racing in tandem with a rush of liberation. I lay back down, my heart still fluttering, but it felt lighter somehow, as if the tight weight had finally released its grip. I closed my eyes, letting the sun kiss my face, feeling that I had opened a door to authenticity. These friendships could still thrive in the light of honesty and vulnerability. I felt ready, not only to embrace my promotion but also the journey that lay ahead, the real support and care we all could share. My breath came easier, and a sense of calm settled around me, louder and clearer than my fears. No longer did I feel fake, instead, I felt real, and that was more than enough. The days that followed were a whirlwind of conversations and shifting dynamics, but in the most beautiful way. When I finally mustered the courage to share the news of my promotion with my friends in person, I was met with a mix of surprise and genuine excitement. Their initial comments about feeling blindsided quickly transformed into congratulations, laughter, and heartfelt words of encouragement. It was a little tense at first, I won't lie. I could see the hurt in their eyes, a touch of betrayal that I hadn't been forthright. But as I explained myself, the fear of flaunting my success, the worries that it might create distance or tension, the air began to shift. I shared how I'd hidden it not out of pride, but out of a desire to protect our bond, fearing that my new title would somehow change the essence of our friendship. To my surprise, they opened up too, sharing their own insecurities and aspirations, a shared vulnerability that deepened our connection. One evening, as we sat piled on my couch, laughter bouncing off the walls, I realized I had uncovered something essential. Our friendship was robust enough to accommodate all our journeys, both the achievements and the struggles. Being real with each other, sharing not just the glorious successes but also our fears and vulnerabilities, that was the glue that bound us. In the weeks that followed, I noticed a change in how we approached life. We celebrated not just milestones but the small victories that felt just as significant. A promotion? Sure. But also a finished project, a completed workout, or even just making it through a stressful week became occasions for cheers and toasts. Gradually, my promotion felt less like a solitary achievement and more like a shared joy, a vibrant thread woven into the fabric of our friendship. I learned that authenticity is powerful, a bridge that led us to deeper waters of understanding and connection. The whispers of fake faded, replaced by a chorus of support and love. I often catch myself smiling, reflecting on how sharing that seemingly insurmountable piece of news created ripples of growth, not just in my career but within my friendships. The journey isn't about standing apart on a pedestal but about sitting beside each other, cheering for one another as we all strive to reach our own skies. And so, as I drift off to sleep each night, I find myself wrapped in a warmth that comes from knowing that being open, vulnerable, and, most importantly, real brings us closer. Whatever the future holds, I'm certain I'll carry this lesson with me, and it fills me with a quiet peace. Sometimes, the greatest victories bloom in the soil of shared truths, where our hearts intertwine like gentle roots beneath the surface. In the end, it's not just about the promotions we earn, but the connections we nurture along the way. I always thought it was just me, lost in an endless sea of holiday cheer and family gatherings that felt more like obligations than celebrations. Picture a cozy living room, the aroma of spiced cider wafting through the air, twinkling lights reflecting in the eyes of my loved ones. It all seems so idyllic, right? But beneath all that warmth, I was often adrift, my heart a bit colder than the wintry breeze that would sometimes sneak through the drafty windows of our old house. I'm Emma, a 20-something trying to navigate the choppy waters of adulthood. For me, family gatherings were supposed to be joyful, but more often than not, they highlighted the gaps in my life, gaps that people seemed all too eager to fill with their unsolicited advice. Just be grateful for what you have, they would say with the kind of smiles that felt less like comfort and more like shackles. Each time, I nod, my heart sinking, wishing I could express that gratitude didn't mean forcing a smile nor accepting something that didn't resonate with my soul. This past holiday season was a culmination of those feelings, leading to an event that still swirls in my memory like the last remnants of a fire, flickering, crackling, and all too close to burning out. It was a gift, one wrapped in vibrant paper and adorned with a bow, yet it carried the weight of expectations I never asked for. While the room filled with laughter and stories, my fingers trembled just a bit as I peeled away the layers of wrapping, desperate to reveal not just the object inside but the underlying sentiment behind it. As the chaos of chatter and the crackle of the fireplace enveloped me, the moment felt thick with unsaid words and hidden truths. I looked around at the faces of my family, kind but often misunderstood, well-meaning yet sometimes thoughtless. That night, I realized that feeling grateful didn't always mean accepting gifts. Sometimes it meant acknowledging my own feelings, carving out space for my truth amid the noise of holiday cheer. And as the reality of that gift began to sink in, I knew something needed to change. I could almost hear the laughter cascading around me like a warm blanket, and for a fleeting moment, I was caught in the joy of being with my family. The twinkling lights danced in their reflections, illuminating the holiday spirit. But something shifted that evening as I held that small box in my hands. When I finally broke the seal and unwrapped the gift, my heart sank despite the smiles circling me. It was so clearly meant to be a heartfelt gesture, a vintage vinyl record of an artist I'd mentioned once in passing, one I hadn't even thought about in years. I forced a smile. Murmurs of "you have to be grateful" floated around me, but inside, a quiet storm brewed. The gift was thoughtful in theory, it was just that I had never felt any connection to that artist. The songs often made me feel more isolated than understood, drenched in a sense of nostalgia I wasn't ready to embrace. Everyone around me was blissfully unaware of the weight that gift carried. My uncle, with his hearty laugh, had meant well, yet that unwrapped record felt like a chain rather than a token of love. As I placed it back in the box, I sensed a trembling inside me, a conflict swirling between family loyalty and honoring my own feelings. There was an awkward pause in the conversation, a slight hitch in the laughter that slid my way. It felt as if I was a query unanswered, an uninvited guest in a place where everybody else seemed to belong. In that moment, something unfurled within me. I could sense the edges of expectations urging me toward compliance, pushing me to invalidate my own feelings for the sake of gratitude. "Be grateful," they said, their expression sunny and bright, but my heart whispered a different truth, a beckoning towards something I never had the courage to articulate before. And just like that, the night shifted. Suddenly, the veneer of holiday cheer felt fragile, and the realization that I could express my own voice in a world that often drowned it out settled like a soft weight in my belly. I didn't want to simply nod and smile anymore. I wanted to figure out how to blend gratitude for the thought with honesty for my own heart. The path ahead looked foggy, filled with unfamiliar turns, but I sensed that a change was brewing, one that began with me daring to unwrap more than just gifts, but layers of myself, too. Days passed since that gathering, each one woven with a soft reminder that a shift was underway. I found myself standing at my kitchen window, a steaming cup of chamomile cradled in my hands, the warmth grounding me as I watched the world outside. A gentle drizzle pattered against the glass, mirroring a newfound rhythm within me, quiet yet insistent. It was as if the universe was whispering, giving me time to reflect and embrace this stirring desire for truth, my truth. At work, I felt different. Where once I hid behind light-hearted banter and easy laughter, I started to see through the charade. My colleague, Sarah, had been chatting animatedly about her recent promotion and the accompanying office celebrations. As she spoke, I felt the familiar knot in my stomach, a tug of envy marred with my attempts to celebrate her success. But instead of stifling my discomfort, I took a breath, permitting myself to feel it fully. "I'm really happy for you, Sarah," I said, my voice steady. "But I also want to share that I've been feeling a bit lost in my own career path." Her eyes flickered with surprise, and then softened. "Thank you for sharing that with me," she replied, her tone becoming warm and inviting. And just like that, I realized it was a door opening, a moment of vulnerability that invited connection rather than distancing me. At home, the echoes of my thoughts lingered longer than before. I spent evenings in quiet contemplation, where my mind danced between memories of the past and hopes for the future. I would light a candle, let its soft flicker be my guide, as I sat in a nook of my living room. I still kept the other gift, the one wrapped with bright paper and bow that felt so wrong, on the shelf. It sat there, like an unwelcome visitor in my life, But now it was brewing something deeper within me, like an artist contemplating a blank canvas. One night, I picked up a notebook, the pages still crisp and inviting. What would it feel like to let the world see my true feelings? I scratched across the page. To my surprise, words poured out, spilling thoughts about gratitude and truth, about the clash between societal expectations and the rhythms of my heart. With each stroke of my pen, I peeled away the suffocating layers that had been tucked within, fears, disappointments, dreams that had yet to see the light. A few weeks later, I gathered my courage like a bouquet, driven not only by desire but by a newfound sense of self. The holiday season was blossoming fully, twinkling lights adorning the streets, yet instead of feeling drenched in joy, I felt a gentle yearning. I decided to return the gift that had been given in good faith but felt so misaligned with who I was, that awful sweater with its garish colors and scratchy texture, a gift that posed as something meaningful but had felt more like a shackle. Walking into that store, I felt a tremor of nerves dance through me. I had rehearsed this moment in my mind, had crafted my acceptance of the returning process, each imagined scenario laced with trepidation. But as I approached the counter, a sense of calm washed over me. "Hi, I'd like to return this," I said gently, forcing a smile that felt real for the first time. The cashier nodded, the routine of returns unfurling around us, and as she processed it, I felt the weight ease from my shoulders. I was reclaiming a little piece of myself, stepping more deeply into the narrative of my own story. As I walked out, a sensation bloomed in my chest, a delicate fusion of lightness and empowerment. I didn't have to hide behind gifts I didn't want or sentimental obligations that blocked my voice. Instead, I could choose sincerity, even if that meant unsettling others. It was okay to stand firm in my feelings. The drizzling rain welcomed me back into the world, and each drop felt like a tiny celebration of this soft unraveling. That night, as I tucked myself into bed, the dim light flickering softly in my room, I realized it wasn't just about returning a sweater, it had become about returning to myself. As I closed my eyes, my heart whispered sweet promises of self-discovery and sincerity, beckoning me ahead to a journey I was now ready to embrace, layer by beautiful layer. I lay there in the cozy cocoon of my blankets, the kind that feels just right, and I started to sift through the day's events like a collection of photographs scattered across the floor of my mind. Each moment unfurled softly, inviting me to linger and reflect. Returning that sweater, an action I once thought of as merely practical, transformed into something much deeper, much richer. It was more than a simple transaction, it was a rebirth of my spirit. In the quiet of my room, I started to piece things together. So many times, I had accepted what others deemed valuable, gifts, expectations, ways of being, believing that gratitude was a shield to disguise my discomfort. The world often told me that I shouldn't rock the boat, that I should smile and say thank you even for gifts that felt like a shackle rather than a treasure. But tonight, with the rhythm of the rain serenading me, I recognized that true gratitude should feel expansive, not suffocating. I understood now that it's okay to cultivate a life filled with authenticity, to shed what doesn't serve my spirit, whether that's a poorly chosen gift or the weight of others' perceptions. I felt a flicker of excitement ignite inside me, a gentle reminder that my journey is uniquely mine to craft. The idea of prioritizing my own feelings, validating them rather than pushing them aside or disguising them as something they aren't, felt like stepping into sunlight after an endless stretch of shadow. As I snuggled deeper into my blankets, I remembered the faces of those who had offered me that lifeless sweater, their intentions woven from a fabric of care and love, albeit misguided. I didn't want to dismiss them, I simply wanted to step into my truth. I realized how liberating it could be to articulate my feelings, to be open with others about my preferences, and to invite them into the conversation. Maybe this act of honesty could foster a new understanding, not just for me but for them too. I wasn't merely returning an item, I was offering them a glimpse into my heart, a chance for connection. With the rain still pattering softly against the window, I embraced this newfound clarity. I could be grateful for the lessons wrapped up in those uncomfortable moments. Each lesson echoed with a question: who am I beneath the weight of expectations? And the answer, slowly unfurling like the petals of a flower, was simple: I was becoming someone who valued honesty, someone whose voice mattered. With this resolution, I drifted into a serene sleep, wrapped in the warmth of possibilities. I felt like I was floating, open and free, ready to explore the shifting horizons of my heart, knowing that every step forward would bring me closer to who I was meant to be. And maybe, just maybe, I'd discover that it's not just about returning gifts but about embracing the profound beauty of myself, sewing it into the fabric of my everyday life, one gentle, intentional thread at a time. As the daylight broke through my window, A soft golden glow spilled into my room, painting everything in warm, hopeful hues. I stretched my limbs, relishing the weightlessness of my thoughts, the lightness in my heart. Today felt different, almost electric, a gentle crackle of possibility lingering in the air. I had awoken not just to a new day but to a new understanding of myself. I had spent so long tangled in the threads of other people's expectations, struggling to weave my own truth into the complex tapestry of relationships and obligations. But this clarity, this beautiful, tender clarity, seemed like an invitation, one that whispered softly to me, urging me to step into my own space. Standing in front of the mirror, I took a long look at my reflection. No longer did I see the eyes filled with doubt or the complexion dulled by fear. Instead, I saw someone awakening, someone ready to reclaim their narrative. A simple act, really, yet powerful. I reached for a crisp piece of paper and a pen, already feeling liberated by the act of creating my own list, one that didn't just say what I was grateful for but what I truly wanted to embrace moving forward. As the ink flowed effortlessly, so did my thoughts. Joy, peace, authenticity, all these words danced on the page like friends I had just invited to a gathering. There it was, my own guiding light illuminating the threads I wanted to weave into my life. I wasn't just bound to accept what I'd been given, I could choose to return the gift of fear and expectation and replace it with a vibrant tapestry of my own making. With a deep breath, I felt the weight of uncertainty melt away. It was invigorating, like breaking the surface after being underwater for too long. I could hear those echoes of doubt slowly fade into a calm symphony of self-acceptance. In that moment, I realized it wasn't just about returning the gifts that loomed over me, it was about reclaiming my joy and wrapping myself in it as a cozy blanket against the chill of the world. And so, with a smile softly touching my lips, I set my intentions not out of obligation, but from a place of love for myself. Today would be a step toward crafting a life that resonated with truth, one gentle stitch at a time. Each moment would become a thread, vibrant and intentional, creating something that reflected my heart, something worth embracing. As I stepped away from that lingering moment of realization, a gentle tide of relief washed over me. The decision wasn't simply about returning tangible items, it was a profound shift in how I viewed my relationship with myself and the people around me. I could almost hear the subtle whispers of encouragement, guiding my hand as I carefully repacked those so-called gifts, selecting each one with intention, unearthing layers of old expectations that never quite fit. Over the next few weeks, I felt lighter. With every item I returned, items that had morphed from tokens of love into shackles of obligation, I gradually let go of the gnawing guilt that clung to me like a shadow. My world began to fill with colors I hadn't noticed before, the deep greens of my garden tucked in the back corner, the vibrant laughter of friends who truly understood me, the scent of fresh coffee that lingered in my kitchen every morning. I had traded in the weight of unwarranted expectations for a soul-nourishing liberation. I found myself in the cozy corners of my life, focusing on the small things that brought me genuine joy. A late-night movie marathon with my favorite blanket, a spontaneous road trip to a neighboring town, and evenings spent in quiet solitude with a good book became my new treasures. I fostered connections with people who celebrated my quirks and passions, our conversations weaving together threads of honesty, support, and laughter. The road wasn't always smooth, and there were moments when the echoes of "be grateful" crept back into my mind. But I learned to recognize those whispers as remnants of an old story, gently reminding me that I had the power to rewrite my narrative. I would remind myself that gratitude thrives best when born from authenticity, not compulsion. Time wove its gentle magic, and as the seasons turned, I started to see the fruits of my labor. I discovered new hobbies that felt like extensions of myself, painting, hiking, even learning to play the ukulele. Each new experience was like laying another stitch in the quilt of my life, cozy and warm, wrapped around me as I ventured out into the world. In the end, I was grateful, not for the gifts I had returned, but for the journey that blossomed in their absence. Letting go had become an act of love towards myself, an embrace of my rightful place in the tapestry of life, a tapestry I was designing for my own heart. So, if someone asks about the gifts I once held, I will smile softly and say, I returned them, and what I received in return was far greater than I could have ever imagined. And in that acceptance, I found peace, realizing I could be both grateful and true to myself, crafting my narrative beautifully, one serene moment at a time. As I reflect on each thread I've woven, I understand now that gratitude isn't merely about accepting what's handed to us. It's about recognizing the beauty in our choices, the courage to create a life that feels authentically ours. Sometimes, the most precious gifts come from the act of letting go, and in that space, we discover the quiet strength to become who we were always meant to be. It's late, and the soft glow of my bedside lamp casts a warm light across my room, illuminating the scattered books and the cozy blanket that burrows me in a little universe of solitude. I can hear the gentle hum of the night outside my window, punctuated by the faint rustle of leaves dancing to the whispers of a cool breeze. There's something calming about this hour, an invitation to reflect upon the day's events, to sift through memories like sifted sand, and find the treasures hiding beneath. I never imagined I'd be here, wrestling with my thoughts as I stare at the ceiling, my mind a chaotic whirl of feelings spilling into the stillness. My life had felt somewhat orderly until my ex, Jamie, reappeared out of the blue. It was as if the universe decided to circle back, reminding me of old chapters I thought had closed for good. He reached out, and I naively believed we could discuss the past like adults, without the tangled strings of emotions that once bound us so tightly. My friends warned me of the dangers, they echoed the same sentiment, don't go back, it never ends well. But I wanted to believe that some friendships could survive the embers of love. I forgot how easily those embers could reignite into flames. Our first dinner was awkward, yet familiar, with laughter spilling out between memories like sunlight breaking through old clouds. But by the time he asked if he could stay the night, all the clarity of my resolve began to evaporate. The room felt smaller, the air thicker, as I searched for my answer. I felt a twinge of guilt, yearning to open my heart as wide as the night sky that surrounded us. But I knew deep down that letting him in again, physically and emotionally, could lead to a path I wasn't ready to tread. So, I said no. It was a small word, but it felt as heavy as a lead weight, the silence that followed almost unbearable. The look in his eyes shifted from surprise to disappointment, and my chest tightened with the weight of emotions. What I had thought was a straightforward decision morphed into a silent storm of repercussions, and suddenly, it seemed like I was the villain in this story, cast against my own will in a role I never wanted to play. As the night deepens, I can't help but wonder if I made the right choice. Maybe I'm not the bad guy, but it sure feels like I am. I find myself caught in a tangle of regret and resolve, soul-searching in the glow of soft lamplight, and realizing that setting boundaries can feel like breaking hearts, even if it's my own I'm trying to protect. It was a chilly evening, one of those nights where the air wraps around you like a gentle reminder of the world turning. I had just settled into my favorite spot on the couch, the blanket pulled snugly around me, ready for what I hoped would be a soothing night of tea and a good book. That evening warmth was quickly snuffed out when I received a text that changed everything. "Hey, could I crash at your place tonight? Just until morning." The familiar twinge of confusion stirred in my stomach as I stared at the screen. This wasn't just any text, it was from Jake, my ex. We had been broken up for a few months now, and while things had ended amicably enough, it had taken me a long time to find my footing again, to reclaim my space. I paused for a moment, feelings flooding back, nostalgia mixed with the clarity that came in the wake of separation. Despite the good memories, the idea of him being in my space again felt surreally out of place. I loved our time together, but I also loved the quiet solitude I had finally embraced. So, I typed out a response as gentle as I could muster. "Hey, Jake. I'm really sorry, but I'd rather not tonight." I hit send, watching as the little dots danced on my screen, waiting for his reply. Maybe I had expected him to understand, to gracefully bow out, but when the reply finally came, it felt like a weight thudding into my chest. "Why not? It's just one night. We can catch up, remember how good it was?" Part of me understood his longing, the echo of shared closeness that still lingered in the air between us. But another part, the part that had clawed through heartbreak, brushed aside those notions. This wasn't just one night, it was a boundary shaking hands with a past that still had the power to pull at my heartstrings. And then came the moment I would replay endlessly in my mind. "I really can't, Jake. I need my space. I've just finally started to feel like me again." The words hung between us like fragile glass, waiting to shatter. He took a moment to respond, and when he did, it felt like everything shifted. The disappointment laced into his words was palpable, a bittersweet reminder of what we had once shared. "You know, for someone who said they wanted to be friends, you sure know how to shut me out." My heart sank. I hadn't meant for it to sound like a rejection, I was protecting my newfound peace. And yet, as I stared at the screen, I felt that undeniable shift. The world outside my small apartment faded away as I processed the implications of my simple no. What had once felt like a protective shield now wrapped around me like a shroud, suffocating and heavy. I had drawn a line, and in doing so, I felt the space between us stretch into something much larger than physical distance. I spent the rest of that evening restless and agitated. I kicked off my shoes and paced around my living room, tossing thoughts back and forth in my mind like a ball that refused to settle. The stillness had turned oppressive, every tick of the clock echoing through the silence like a reminder of my choice. Am I a bad person? I whispered to myself, the words tumbling out as I sank onto my sofa. By the time the sun sank low on the horizon, painting the walls with warm hues of orange and soft whispers of pink, I felt the weight of regret overshadowing the firm resolve I had initially felt. I had navigated through the aftermath of our breakup, carving out a space to breathe and heal, but somehow, saying no had felt so wrong, as if I'd chipped away at the bridge we were trying to rebuild. It left me questioning the sincerity of my intention to remain friends, as if the mere act of setting a boundary now marked me as the adversary. As the days turned into a blur, the aftermath of that conversation tainted my daily rituals. My mornings, once sacred and serene, now felt like a canvas smeared with doubt. My coffee lost its comforting warmth and became an afterthought as I scrolled through my messages, searching for a hint of reconciliation that never arrived. Each ping that echoed through my phone was followed by a jolt of tension, not because of any new message, but because I realized I was still clinging to nostalgia like a fragile thread that could snap at any moment. Walking through the park and seeing couples wrapped up in their own worlds made my chest tighten uncomfortably. Memories of laughter and warmth surged forward, mingling with the bitter taste of loss. I inhaled the crisp air deeply, desperate to ground myself, but nothing could shake the gnawing feeling that maybe, just maybe, I had made a mistake. Perhaps he wouldn't have been so hurt if I'd just allowed him to stay. Watching people move together, I felt a flash of guilt and the shadows of my decisions loomed ever larger. As I returned home each evening, the light in my apartment felt more subdued, less inviting, as if it too mourned the space that felt increasingly empty. I would set my keys down with a heavy sigh, staring blankly across the room, haunted by the absence of his energy. It was a reminder of the intricate dance we had shared, and now I felt like I had stepped on his toes and shattered the rhythm we had struggled to maintain. I tried to rationalize my decision but found myself constantly second-guessing the strength it required. I wanted to stand firm, to embrace a new version of myself who knew her limits, yet the emotional turmoil wrapped around me like fog, clouding my vision. My inner dialogue spiraled, why can't I just let it be? It's just one night. And with that, an aching loneliness seeped in, gnawing at the edges of my heart where hope once bloomed. Life continued around me, my friends tried to pull me back into the light, inviting me out and coaxing smiles from my lips. But the shadows were always there, waiting to seep into conversations and hang heavy over laughter. I felt split, disconnected from both my past and my present, as if I were drifting just out of reach of something, someone, waiting patiently in the silence for me to decide, to choose. Every single day turned into a quiet battle, the echoes of his disappointed voice trailing behind me like a wandering spirit. I was a good person, wasn't I? I wanted to be. As each sunset marked the end of another day spent in contemplation, I found myself standing at the crossroads of what I thought was right and what felt achingly wrong. I was learning to navigate my newfound self, but the path felt littered with longing for understanding, a bond that lingered like a gentle caress and yet felt as fragile as glass. At first, I thought refusing him the comfort of my space, a fleeting act of self-preservation, was selfish. I wrestled with the impulse to be kind and accommodating, to give into a familiar rhythm that had once felt like home. But as I stood there, contemplating my decision, the warmth of the sun dipping below the horizon, something inside began to shift. I realized it was time to check in on my own needs, to reflect on the patterns I had been so accustomed to dancing around. In the days that followed, I allowed myself to sit with the discomfort of being labeled the bad guy. It stung more than I cared to admit, a reminder of how deeply intertwined I had become with his expectations. I would close my eyes and hear the echoes of our shared laughter, but alongside that warmth came the chill of all the moments I had stifled my own voice to accommodate his desires. As I contemplated my choice, it became clear, healthy boundaries aren't just about keeping the other person out, they're about creating a safe space for myself. I didn't want to be the martyr, pulling the weight of our past into my present. Instead, I wanted to honor the journey I was on, to acknowledge the progress I had made in reclaiming my identity. The more I reflected, the more liberated I felt from the remnants of our history together. It dawned on me how much I had allowed myself to fade into the background, to slip away from the vibrant life I was meant to lead. And so, I vowed to embrace the complexity that came with distance, to be unafraid of being seen as unkind, if it meant being kinder to myself. Sure, there would be criticism, but isn't growth often marred by discomfort? I reminded myself that sometimes, being compassionate means taking a step back, prioritizing my own emotional well-being, even when it felt like I was betraying the good memories we had created. As I lay down to sleep that night, I felt an unfamiliar but welcome lightness. The shadows still lingered, but they no longer suffocated me. They felt more like companions on a journey of discovery, reminders of where I'd been, rather than chains binding me to my past. Perhaps I was not the villain in a story of love gone wrong. Perhaps I was simply a protagonist learning to stand tall, to choose myself bravely. I closed my eyes, the weight of my boundaries settling gently in my heart, realizing then that sometimes the hardest choices lead us to the clearest reflections of who we are meant to be. As moonlight spilled through my window, I could hear the gentle whisper of the night, wrapping around me like a soft blanket. The world outside was still, but inside my heart, a quiet storm had begun to settle. It was in that serene moment, when the chaos of my thoughts distanced themselves, that the truth knocked gently at the door of my heart. I found myself replaying the long conversation we'd had before I made my decision, the way it felt both empowering and terrifying to say no. The way his face fell, that mix of disbelief and desperation, lingered in my mind. I had seen the hurt in his eyes, and yet, instead of drowning in guilt, I discovered a quiet bit of courage taking root. I suddenly remembered a time not so long ago when I had promised myself that my happiness mattered just as much. In the stillness, I envisioned my life as a garden. Each of us plants ourselves in soil that nurtures us, rooted deep or sometimes, uprooted and replanted somewhere new. I realized I had been clinging too tightly to a flower that had wilted long ago, mistaking its remnants of beauty for a reason to stay. With each passing day, I had watered its memory, forgetting that gardens need to be pruned and tended. Then, clarity washed over me. I began to embrace that lightness I felt. It was as if I could finally exhale after holding my breath for so long. Yes, maybe I wouldn't be the person he wanted me to be, but I was becoming who I needed to be. I thought of all the paths ahead, unfamiliar yet full of potential. Washing over me was a soothing realization. My worth was not dictated by others' feelings, it was inherent, buried deep. I nestled deeper into my dreams, letting the worries float away like clouds. It struck me that even if the world painted me as a bad guy, I knew that standing firm in my truth wasn't villainous, it was the act of self-love. I whispered to myself, sometimes, choosing you is the bravest thing you can do. And as I surrendered to sleep, I found peace in the notion that my heart was learning to bloom in ways I never expected. It was a conversation with my own soul, a promise to nurture my garden, no matter the judgment from others. And that felt remarkably freeing. The days that followed were a soft blend of clarity and quiet introspection. I faced the murmurs and whispers, not with defensiveness, but with a gentle resolve. Friends approached with caution, gauging my feelings, and I found myself sharing moments from my journey. With each conversation, the weight of their disapproval slowly lifted like morning mist, revealing a sunlit path ahead. I realized the importance of boundaries wasn't just a lesson for others, it was a pivotal chapter in my own story. Those who understood the heart behind my decision gravitated closer, offering support and shared experiences. It became apparent that sometimes, when you choose to meander away from what is comfortable, you stumble upon authentic connections that resonate with your spirit. Time softened the edges of the situation. I would occasionally hear from my ex, and while the exchanges were tinged with an awkwardness, they carried a different energy, one that signaled acceptance rather than animosity. I discovered that maintaining a respectful distance didn't have to equate to animosity, it was merely stepping into a phase that allowed both of us the space to heal and grow. Building on this newfound strength, I began investing time in pursuits that lit my soul aflame. Hiking in the crisp morning air, painting colors on canvases, and rekindling friendships reminded me that I was not just surviving, I was thriving. Each moment spent rediscovering my passions was a step away from the shadows of the past. Every so often, I still felt the sting of judgment from those who didn't fully grasp my choice. Yet, I learned to greet those feelings with compassion, both for myself and for them. Their reactions were woven into the fabric of their experiences, not mine to carry. I began embracing the notion that it was okay to be the bad guy in someone else's narrative as long as I was the hero in my own. As winter made way for spring, I felt a new blossom unfurl within me. I had forged a path shaped by resilience and a profound sense of self. It didn't matter if the world saw me in stark black and white, I was learning to paint my life in shades of vibrant color, dancing freely outside of the borders I once thought defined me. Ultimately, the bittersweet symphony of life continued to play. I stood firm, knowing that the act of choosing myself wasn't just a moment of bravery but a lifetime commitment to honor my own heart's desires. And so, I welcomed the flow of life with a heart open to all the possibilities, cherishing the freedom I found in vulnerability and the strength of standing alone. As I reflected on this journey, I realized that sometimes the most liberating thing we can do is to redefine our own story, refusing to fit into someone else's plot. In every ending, there is a new beginning, and within every choice, a whisper of hope. So, let us dance to the rhythm of our own hearts, knowing that it's the embrace of our own truth that leads us home. It was one of those overcast Monday mornings when the world felt muted, the clouds thick and heavy like an old quilt draped over my small office. The hum of fluorescent lights buzzed softly above me, blending with the distant sound of fingers tapping on keyboards and muffled conversations in the background. I always found solace in this mundane routine, the comforting rhythm of workdays that stretched and wove together like the familiar stitch of knitted fabric. I work at a modest marketing firm in downtown, nestled between a bustling coffee shop and a quaint bookstore. It's a place where ideas flow as freely as the caffeine, and laughter dances in the air alongside the scent of freshly printed paper. My colleagues have become a second family to me over the years, a band of quirky individuals who each bring a bit of color to the sepia-toned monotony of office life. There's Rachel, the witty social media strategist whose sharp comebacks are often the highlight of my day, and Marcus, our analytical wizard, who spends more time analyzing spreadsheets than socializing, but his dry humor makes up for it. Then there's Lucy, my dear friend and the mother of a curious little toddler named Noah. Her enthusiasm for life is infectious, and her laughter dances through the air like sunbeams peeking through the clouds. It was a little after 10 when Lucy strolled into the office that day, her hair slightly tousled, cheeks flushed with the crispness of the autumn air, and in her arms, Noah, who was tightly bundled in a tiny blue and yellow coat with his dark eyes peering out like twin marbles. I could feel the warmth that radiated off this little family unit, and it made my heart flutter with both joy and apprehension. People often say that the office is no place for children, but somehow, I always thought it would be charming to have them around, to see life filtered through their innocent eyes. But what I didn't foresee that day was how it would unravel into a series of unexpected emotions, leaving me feeling more like a reluctant antagonist than a supportive friend. Even now, late in the evening, after the day's chaos has faded, I can still picture that moment, the way the air crackled with energy, tinged with a sense of vulnerability as Lucy introduced Noah to the office with an infectious smile that we'd all come to adore. Yet, as the hours ticked away and the minutes turned into a montage of giggles and crying, everything began to shift in a way I never anticipated. And as it turned out, the sound of a toddler's wails echoed louder in my mind than the music of laughter, marking a day that would change not just how I saw my coworkers but how I saw myself within the tapestry of our small office life. It all started with a simple knock on the door, a sound that barely registered amidst the hum of our morning coffee chatter. That morning felt light-hearted, like a soft breeze teasing the edges of spring. I was seated at my desk, half focused on deciphering the latest client emails and half listening to Jenna recount her weekend plans. Then came Lucy, her presence a rainbow bursting through the gray corner of our office. "Hey, everyone. I brought my little ray of sunshine today," she chirped, her smile stretching wide as she cradled her toddler, Noah, close to her side, his small fingers wrapped around her finger like a lifeline. The room brightened, there was something infectious about her joy, and despite my initial reservations, hadn't we just discussed the need for focus on a Monday? I couldn't help but smile. Noah's bright eyes darted around the office, soaking in the new surroundings. Laughter erupted as he showed off his little wave, and for a moment, everything felt effortlessly perfect. Lucy set him down, and he wandered a few steps, taking in the unfamiliar space, while Lucy left and chatted with us, all of us athletically bending over backwards to entertain the tiny silhouette darting across the floor. But then, as if on cue, the laughter was pierced by a sound that would not only reverberate throughout the day but shift the very tone of our workplace, a high-pitched wail, gaining momentum with every second. My heart sank as I glanced at Noah, now standing still, his expressive little face scrunching up in confusion, his tiny voice cutting through my day like a knife. It was one of those moments that unraveled slowly, like a spool of yarn slowly conceding to gravity. I could feel the tension grow. Lucy's smile faltered as she swooped in to pick up her son, the embarrassment starting to seep into her tone. "Oh, sweetheart, come on. It's okay," she coaxed, glancing up at us with a slight sheen of panic behind her eyes. But then, as her eyes landed on me, something shifted. I felt the weight of it all, the unspoken accusation hanging delicately in the air. "He just wants his snack," I offered, trying to be helpful, yet somehow the words felt like they were ticking down a clock. Because in that vulnerable moment, with Noah in her arms and both of us wrapped in the unexpected chaos, I realized I was going to be seen as the source of his distress. Her tired smile faltered even more. "You think? You know how they get when they haven't eaten. There was an underlying edge to her voice, the kind that whispered that I had contributed to the tide turning against her. It was a simple incident, a child not yet accustomed to the bustle of grown-up life, but it somehow felt monumental, laden with implications of blame I never intended to bear. I watched as her eyes darted, searching for an ally, while my heart sank a bit deeper into an uneasy pit. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of the emotional cascade that would unfold, revealing hidden corners of my own heart amidst a day spent down the rabbit hole of misunderstanding. As the days rolled on after that chaotic afternoon in the office, an unsettling change began to permeate my daily life. I found myself treading softly, both physically and emotionally, as if I were walking on a tightrope strung high above the ground. The allure of my usual routines, those comforting rituals that once anchored me, gradually morphed into reminders of that fateful day. In the morning, the gentle aroma of coffee brewing could only do so much to lift my spirits. The quiet hum of my coworkers chatting and the soft rhythm of keyboards clacking suddenly felt charged. Every laugh, every little cheerful noise, echoed with a new weight. Was this how it always felt for those around me, each interaction brimming with unspoken judgments, invisible but ever-present? I caught myself stealing glances at Jessica, the co-worker whose toddler had turned our serene workday upside down. She had become a lighthouse in a stormy sea, and I was more lost than I cared to admit. Even the lunch breaks that were once a sanctuary of shared jokes and stories morphed into minefields of tension. My co-workers would ask about Jessica's son, about the office's new workspace childcare initiative that she'd bravely championed. I could feel their eyes studying me, gauging my reaction, each inquiry a prodding reminder of how delicate the balance had become. Did they think I would lash out or roll my eyes? It felt like I was under a microscope, every perceived slip or sigh a potential pronunciation of guilt. In the quiet moments alone at my desk, my mind would wander back to that child's distress. The wailing had pierced through my heart more than I cared to admit. I didn't do anything wrong, I whispered to myself, a little mantra meant to keep the creeping fog of self-doubt at bay. But failed assurances didn't quiet the storm within. Instead, they nudged me to reflect on my own inner fears. What if I had been a catalyst for that situation? What if I had set off a chain of events that led to Jessica feeling isolated and overwhelmed? With productivity waning, I sought solace in doodling, a harmless escape that transported me to whimsical landscapes where no crying baby existed. I filled pages with drawings of friendly animals and peaceful meadows, their innocence providing the comfort I desperately needed. Still, I marveled at how something so small could hold the world's weight. A toddler's tears had somehow unlocked a well of compassion and vulnerability I hadn't expected to see bubbling to the surface within me. Then, one afternoon, Jessica approached me. Her eyes were wide and her smile genuine, though tinged with the residual shadows of our earlier encounter. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice soft as the breeze that rustled the trees outside our window. We stepped away from our desks, finding a quiet corner bathed in warm light. "I'm sorry if I came off defensive that day," she began, her voice hints of trembling uncertainty. "It's just, parenting can be overwhelming, you know? And I didn't want to seem like I was blaming you. It was a lot." I felt the tension in my chest begin to dissolve as I listened, genuinely for the first time. "I get it," I replied slowly, my own walls crumbling amongst the empathy unfolding before us. I didn't take it personally, but I should have reached out sooner, too. That profound exchange ushered in a change, a slow reconciliation of understanding in which the air around us felt lighter. Over the weeks that followed, I noticed subtle shifts in my heart. No longer did I walk into the office with trepidation, instead, I felt proactive, open to possibilities. The playful sounds of children would echo through the hallways, and I learned to embrace them, allowing the laughter of innocence to soften my edges. Little moments of connection began to stitch together our professional relationship in ways I hadn't foreseen. We shared smiles now, glances that conveyed a mutual recognition of the human experience, that chaotic beauty of longing, parenting, and the tender complexities of connection. And in those moments, I understood that the cries of a child had unveiled something profound in me, a compassion that felt at once fragile and infinitely resilient. As I left the office each day, I carried with me a sense of calm acceptance, knowing that I had navigated the delicate dance of misunderstanding and emerged with a clearer heart. A new perspective grew. We're all just doing our best amidst the noise, taking one gentle step at a time. Reflection: looking back on that chaotic week, I realize how unprepared I was, not just for a coworker's toddler in the office, but for my own reactions to it all. At first, I felt disrupted, suffocated by the noise and the unpredictability of it. I thought I was here to do a job, to focus on tasks and numbers, to check off my to-do list. But then, In that noisy whirlwind, I was reminded that life is never really that neat or orderly. When the little boy cried, I felt the initial pang of annoyance. I remember thinking, why would she bring him here? Doesn't she know we're supposed to be working? It felt like a disruption to my little bubble of focus. But as those chaotic moments unfolded, I found myself softening. I began to see everything through a different lens. The cries were not just interruptions, they were expressions of needs, innocent calls for comfort, play, and understanding. I was witnessing vulnerability in its purest form. It dawned on me that so often, my perspective had been limited by my own rigid expectations. I'd focused solely on my responsibilities and neglected to embrace the messiness of life. We're all navigating our own storms, and sometimes, they spill into spaces we think should be orderly. I began to understand that my coworker wasn't just bringing chaos, she was bringing the truth of human experience into our sterile office, reminding me that love and responsibility can crisscross in unexpected ways. I learned that encountering discomfort, whether it's a child's cry or a coworker's frustration, can lead to unexpected understanding. It nudged me to reevaluate my priorities, to prioritize compassion and empathy over the need for order. There's beauty in the mess, maybe more than I had ever allowed myself to see. This experience has been a gentle push for me to embrace the human connections around me fully. Now, as I walk through the office, I find myself smiling more, pausing to genuinely ask about my colleagues' lives beyond work. We're not just coworkers, we're navigating this intricate tapestry of life together. And I'm starting to realize that tender moments, no matter how seemingly chaotic, hold the power to connect us in extraordinary ways. So as I hope to put my head on my pillow tonight, I'm filled with a comforting clarity. I've learned that vulnerability connects us, that compassion is a strength, and that in the grand, messy dance of life, it's perfectly okay to let go of the need for perfection and embrace the beautiful imperfections instead. The world is a little brighter when we allow ourselves to breathe in the chaos, appreciate the laughter, and soften at the edges. I was sitting at my desk, staring at the computer screen, when I heard a tiny voice cutting through the usual office buzz. It was high-pitched and unmistakably distressed. A few heads turned, and I soon figured out it was little Leo, my coworker's toddler, who had somehow made his way into the realm of spreadsheets and conference calls. My heart squeezed for him as he burst into tears, the kind where he threw his head back and let out a wail that echoed against the walls. I could sense my colleague, usually so composed, faltering under the weight of both empathy and discomfort. Then, she turned to me, her eyes wide with desperation as if somehow, this was my fault, a silent accusation that whispered between the lines of her frantic expressions. But in that moment, something shifted within me. As I watched her scramble to comfort Leo, I felt a warming wave of understanding wash over me. I took a deep breath, closing my eyes for just a moment, letting the chaos surround me like a beloved blanket. It struck me then, all at once. We're all just doing our best, aren't we? Whether it's a toddler navigating this big, loud world or an adult trying to balance work pressure with personal life chaos. With that thought, a sense of calm wrapped around me, soothing my earlier annoyance. I stood up slowly, feeling a sense of lightness in my heart, and walked over to them. My coworker was crouched down, cradling Leo with one hand while trying to whisper sweet nothings and go back to being the cool, collected professional we all knew. I knelt beside her, looked into Leo's teary eyes, and said, "Hey buddy, I think you have a superpower, you can cry louder than a fire truck." To my surprise, that simple comment cracked a smile through his tears. It was like a little spark in the heaviness of the day, and I could see my coworker visibly relax. She chuckled softly, and we shared that precious moment of laughter amid the storm of parenting and work. Leo stopped crying. Instead, he tilted his head, still teary-eyed, but now a glimmer of curiosity danced in his gaze. I reached out my hand and said, "Want to play a game? Let's see how many animals we can name." Soon the three of us were laughing together, a moment of connection amongst the chaos. I felt a gentle release in my chest, the tiny threads of resentment fraying and falling away. In that instant, I chose a different path. I decided to lean into this messiness. I decided to embrace the human experience that enveloped us all, the laughter, the tears, the interruptions, and the beauty that came from it all. As I returned to my desk afterward, I felt lighter, like I'd exhaled something heavy I didn't even know I was holding on to. This was life, the beautiful, unpredictable whirlwind of it all, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. Embracing the imperfections felt like taking a deep, refreshing breath after holding it too long. And with that, I smiled. Outcome in the days that followed that chaotic afternoon, something beautiful began to unfold. My coworker, Lisa, seemed more at ease, as if our little interaction had somehow brightened her day, too. Every time we passed each other in the hallway, she would give me a warm smile, an unspoken understanding swirling between us like a gentle breeze. At our next team meeting, Lisa brought up how we should make the office more family-friendly, suggesting a few adjustments that would allow parents to feel more at home while balancing their responsibilities. I was surprised to hear others chime in with their own stories of juggling work and parenting. It was heartwarming to witness each sharing their own messy experiences, enthusiastic toddlers interrupting important calls and supermarket meltdowns that led to unexpected moments of humor. Before long, we decided to organize a monthly family day at the office, where coworkers could bring their children, pets, or anyone else who brightened their lives. It became a space where laughter and conversation flourished amidst the inevitable chaos. I realized that this had transformed into a cherished part of our workplace culture, uniting us with threads of empathy and connection that I hadn't anticipated. And as we all gathered for the first family day, children running about and laughter echoing through the halls, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Here we were, navigating the unpredictable rhythm of life together. I discovered that embracing imperfection wasn't just about accepting the mess, it was about finding beauty in it, all the shared glances, the bursts of laughter, and the unexpected friendships that blossomed among us. That day, as I watched Lisa play with her son, a smile stretched across her face, mirroring my own. We were a chaotic family, and it felt wonderful. I had learned that sometimes, all it takes to diffuse a tense moment is the willingness to open your heart. Little did I know, that moment, once filled with frustration, would transform into a mosaic of connection, laughter, and cherished memories that lingered longer than any noise or chaos could drown out. As I walked out that evening, I realized it's the moments of vulnerability that often draw us closer. In the swirl of chaos, we find not just forgiveness but also a deep, unspoken understanding of each other. Life's most beautiful connections often bloom in the messiest of circumstances, reminding us that love and empathy are the greatest sources of strength we have. It's funny how sometimes the quietest moments can echo the loudest in your heart. I've always been the kind of person who preferred the warmth of a small gathering over the chaos of a big party. I find comfort in the soft murmur of familiar voices, soft clinks of glasses, and the gentle hum of laughter weaving through the air. Tonight was supposed to be one of those nights, a cozy little work party to celebrate our little office's latest milestones. But as I sat surrounded by what should have felt like friends, I found myself feeling more like a ghost drifting through the walls of a place I used to belong. I remember arriving, the cool evening air wrapping around me like a gentle embrace. The office, the little brick building nestled at the end of a bustling street, had been lit up with twinkling fairy lights, giving it a warm, inviting glow. The scent of spiced cider wafted through the main room, mingling with the sound of chatter and the occasional pop of laughter, each fragment inviting me deeper into the crowd. I had spent the day crafting the perfect outfit, a soft sweater that felt like a hug, paired with my favorite jeans. I had even dared to style my hair, a rare moment of effort that I hoped would boost my confidence as I navigated all those excited faces. But as the night unfolded, I found myself standing on the periphery, the familiar swirl of conversations playing out around me like a scene I watched from afar. It was a motley crew, my colleagues, each with their quirks and charms. There was Sarah, whose infectious laugh punctuated the air, and Mark, ever the jokester, spinning tales that unraveled like the ribbons of colorful decorations hanging above us. In the midst of it all, I felt that familiar tension rise, the feeling of being part of a tapestry while somehow being separate from it too. Then came the moment that felt like a tiny, unexpected prick to my heart. As we toasted to our accomplishments, someone raised a glass and turned to me, eyes shining with enthusiasm, only to fumble over my name. You, they exclaimed, and in that instant, the vibrant air was suddenly thick with an uncomfortable silence. I could feel the heat creeping up my cheeks, a blush that spoke of awkwardness rather than warmth. The laughter swirled on around me, but instead of inclusion, I felt the sharp sting of exclusion pierce through the joy. It was a small thing, really. A moment that could have easily been forgotten. Yet somehow, in that sea of friendly faces, it felt monumental. As I stood there, watching the colors of the room blur into a spectrum of cheer, I realized that sometimes it's the smallest slips that unlock the biggest feelings of solitude. And so, with a soft sigh and a heart heavier than I had anticipated, I quietly made my way toward the exit, leaving behind the warm glow of connection that had started to feel achingly distant. My hand brushed against the frosted glass of the door, and in that fleeting moment, I hesitated. Inside, the laughter bubbled like a warm drink, but outside, the world stretched on endlessly. Just minutes earlier, I had joined my coworkers at the annual office party, a lively gathering meant to bring us all closer. The tables were draped in crisp white cloth, adorned with little bowls of pretzels and trays of cookies. The twinkling lights strung overhead cast a magical glow, and I really had wanted to be part of it all. I remember the moment vividly, the moment that felt so small yet weighed so much. A few colleagues were engaged in animated conversation. I had wandered over, a friendly smile in place, confident that I could navigate this social sea. And then it happened. One of my coworkers, Greg, happily exclaimed, "Wow, I'm so glad to see all your familiar faces." And a shout out to Malcolm. And Avery. And, there it was. The pause. The unintentional glance towards me, then away, as if my name had slipped free from his mind, lost in the rush of names and smiles. I could almost see it floating away, light as a feather, but heavy enough to bring the world to a sudden halt. It wasn't even the first time I'd felt eclipsed by someone else's oversight, but when that moment arrived, it stood in stark relief against the backdrop of laughter and warmth. In that silence enveloping me, the laughter became distant. I felt my cheeks heat up again, not from embarrassment this time but from the flush of rejection. I didn't want everyone to notice, so I stood still, a shadow in the sunlight. Just a long beat of time passed, and I realized that while I had taken steps to connect, I had also been left behind. A simple name forgotten, and yet it stirred something deep within me, a longing for acknowledgement, for a place where I felt seen. Instead of being pulled into the friendly chatter, I could only hear my own heart thumping louder, echoing in that gentle yet jarring silence. And so, feeling the weight of that moment pressing against my chest, I turned away from the gleeful clamor. I gracefully walked towards the door, my thoughts swirling in tandem with the vibrant chaos I left behind. There was a certain solace in the quiet of the hallway, a moment of reflection before stepping out into the cool evening air. I hadn't wanted to leave, not really, but the warmth of connection felt too far out of reach, and perhaps it was time for me to find my own way into the night. As I stepped outside, the cool breeze wrapped around me like a familiar blanket, soothing my lightly frayed edges. I took a deep breath, the air being a mixture of crisp autumn leaves and lingering laughter from within the office. I walked toward my car, each step acting like a gentle reminder. I had always wanted to be part of that buzz, a vital piece of this puzzle that kept evolving, even if it felt like a puzzle that was dismissively arranged without me. Over the following days, I noticed the little ways the experience nudged at me. I found it hard to shake off that night, like trying to brush away a loose thread that kept unraveling my sense of belonging. Each morning as I rolled into the office, I greeted the sun with a smile. My co-workers chimed back amiably, but somehow their words felt distant. I dove into my tasks, my fingers typing furiously to drown out that curious hollow feeling, yet it still lingered like a whisper in the back of my mind. I'd sit in the break room and watch their light-hearted moments from the sidelines, feeling like a ghost flickering in and out of view. The way they shared inside jokes and laughter made me smile, of course, yet there was always a thread of longing that pulled at my heart. Why had they forgotten my name? I pondered it again and again until the very act of thinking felt heavy, a dense fog settling in, turning the once vibrant office air into something more muted and gray. On a particularly rainy Wednesday, my usual coffee break was overtaken by a wave of self-doubt. I absent-mindedly stirred my steaming cup while staring at the raindrops sliding down the window. Maybe it wasn't just about my name. Maybe I was always an outsider, an uninvited guest in a party where everyone else already knew the dance. How easily I could get lost in a crowd but still not feel seen. That night, I sought comfort in the most mundane of routines. I put on my favorite playlist and wrapped myself in a cozy blanket, the melodies coaxing me back to a soft state of calm. I allowed myself to sink into those feelings, loneliness and yearning, as though they were just parts of me craving attention rather than enemies to banish. I reflected on how connection takes many forms, and perhaps my own way of belonging was yet to unfold. In the days that followed, something began to shift. Rather than trying to forge immediate connections, I found peace in small, quiet moments, sipping my coffee, watching the sunlight trace its way across the desk, and breathing in the atmosphere of the space. My co-workers engaged in their chats while I listened, absorbing their laughter. Oddly enough, I no longer felt as pressed to participate or be recognized. Instead, I embraced the view of my own inner landscape. I started sharing bits of humor with a couple of colleagues I felt slightly more comfortable with, small threads woven back into the fabric of camaraderie. Each chuckle or shared smile felt like depositing a coin into a meager jar, slowly but surely, building up again, creating a bit of intimacy through our fragmented routines. They didn't know how their kind responses were filling the cracks I hadn't realized were there before. I began investing more time in discovering what they loved, talking about weekend plans or favorite movies, shifting the focus from me back to the pleasant ebb and flow of conversation. As weeks drifted on, the initial sting softened. The moment of being forgotten had been a starting point, after all. It taught me to turn inward, to shape a space of warmth within myself before striving to find external validation. I started to appreciate the gentleness of solitude, a quiet corner from where to observe, to reflect, to grow. It was then that I realized it was never merely about the party, nor was it just about the name. It was an invitation to stretch out into the world, to explore my ideas of belonging and connection, inching my way back into the fabric of life one delicate thread at a time. As I sit here, reflecting on that office party and the way it unfolded, I find myself feeling a warm glow of understanding. For so long, I had tied my sense of worth to how others perceived me or, more specifically, how they remembered me. It's funny, really, how a fleeting moment can domino into a cascade of self-discovery. I thought that being acknowledged, being known, really known, was what made a person feel valued. But what I didn't recognize until later is that the validation I craved was always meant to come from within. Leaving the party felt like a sad whisper of defeat at first, but it opened the door to something beautifully transformative. In the silent aftermath, I learned to cherish the simplicity of my own company. I began savoring those moments alone, whether it was curling up with a book, journaling my thoughts, or simply sitting in a coffee shop and soaking up the world around me. Slowly, I realized that I didn't need to fill the spaces of my life with the constant noise of others' approval. Instead, I found joy in a quieter rhythm, where my thoughts could dance freely without the interruptions of outside judgment. I started to see my colleagues in a different light, too. I understood them better, beyond their masks of professionalism. They were just like me, wrapped up in their lives, facing their own uncertainties and struggles. The cavalcade of forgetfulness had unwittingly pushed me to explore empathy, to share warmth and kindness. I delighted in those simple exchanges, a smile here, a compliment there. It became a cycle of giving that nourished my spirit more than receiving validation ever had. As weeks turned into months, I began to reshape my own narrative. I learned that connecting isn't a one-way street bound by memory, it's a dance of vulnerability, of opening up and embracing shared experiences. I recognize that everyone walks around with their own elephants in their rooms, those moments of worry, insecurity, or forgotten names. It made me wonder if perhaps we're all just searching for ways to be seen, to feel valued for who we truly are. The world, I realized, is far bigger and more intricate than the tight confines of an office party. So here I am now, not defined by moments of forgetfulness, but by the rich tapestry of connections I'm weaving every day. I embrace the unpredictability of relationships, how they evolve, how people come and go, because each person adds a unique thread to my story. I hold my name with pride, but even more so, I cherish this newfound understanding of myself and others. Now, when I walk into a room, I do so with the intention of redistributing warmth, not just waiting for someone to call my name. And that acceptance, that beautiful, soft acceptance, feels like coming home. As I stood there, watching the crowd, a gentle wave of clarity washed over me. The chatter, the laughter, the clinking of glasses, all of it began to fade into a soothing hum. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the scent of mingling colognes and freshly poured drinks. It was then that I realized I had been holding on to something heavy, something that didn't really belong to me, a desperate need for recognition, for validation in this chaotic yet beautiful tapestry of human interaction. I let out a soft sigh, and all at once, it wasn't just about them forgetting my name. It became clear that this was about my own expectations standing between me and joy. Each time I felt overlooked, I had been handing over pieces of my self-worth, waiting for someone else to complete my narrative. But tonight, as the sound softened and my heart began to flutter with an unexpected freedom, I decided that wasn't how I wanted to tell my story anymore. In that moment of quiet realization, I felt a lightness seep into my chest. I gently let go of the need for each person in that room to remember my name. Instead, what if I let them see the real me, beyond the labels and titles? What if I actively chose to invest in others, to weave connection through kindness and warmth, regardless of recognition? I glanced around the room, no longer seeking eyes or names but rather the glimmers of life and people's smiles, each one a unique story, just like mine. I put one foot forward, then another, letting the rhythm of the evening guide me. I struck up a conversation with the lady at the punch bowl, her eyes lighting up as I asked about her favorite holiday traditions. Little by little, I could feel the warmth returning. In choosing to step into the moment and embrace whatever lay ahead, I released the weight of insecurity and stepped into the fullness of belonging. And as I did, I realized that sometimes, letting go is the most liberating decision of all. It's in that freedom that I found my name, my true self, written boldly in the connections I forge, not in the fleeting acknowledgments of a crowded room. Outcome: as I walked out of the office party that night, a quiet resolve settled within me. Yes, they had forgotten my name, but in doing so, they had unwittingly pushed me to remember my own. The laughter and spark of conversations continued to echo in my mind, a comforting melody, reminding me that I was indeed part of this tapestry, woven with threads of new friendships and shared stories. The next morning, I made a choice. I sat down at my desk and penned a note to everyone, light-hearted yet sincere, calling back to the party's playful energy. I thanked them for their company and shared a few anecdotes from the evening. I wrote about the lady at the punch bowl, her infectious laughter, and how she brightened my night with tales of family recipes. I wanted them to see the moments they may have missed, to understand that we're all searching for that connection, that spark. To my surprise, I received replies almost immediately. Some laughed with me, admitting they'd forgotten names in the bustle. Others were eager to share their own stories of misfit moments, bonding over our shared humanity. What had initially felt like exclusion transformed into an unexpected web of camaraderie. As the days passed, I found myself stepping into more conversations. I stopped waiting for someone to remind me I belonged. Instead, I made it happen. We gathered for lunch more often, and I began to know my coworkers not just by their titles but by their passions, their quirks, and even their fears. With each passing week, people began remembering my name, not just because they had to, but because they wanted to. Through what felt initially like a lonely experience, I learned that sometimes the quietest moments illuminate the loudest truths. I discovered that belonging isn't always a loud proclamation, it's often whispered in shared laughter and understanding smiles. And so, while that evening had begun with a tinge of embarrassment, it blossomed into something bittersweet yet beautiful. In the end, I left not with a sense of rejection but with a heart full of connections. I realized my name could not be forgotten in the hearts of those I chose to engage with. I went home that night with a lightness in my step, reveling in the comfort that sometimes, the stories we weave are more important than the names we carry. And in the gentle embrace of community, I finally found my name anew. As I settled into the calm of my quiet room, the weight of that night transformed into a gentle reminder, in a world that sometimes forgets our names, it's the connections we nurture that truly define us. After all, it's not the echoes of recognition that matter most, but the warmth of shared moments that linger long after we turn out the lights. There's something almost magical about summer evenings when the air is thick with the scent of sun-warmed grass and the distant laugh of friends mingles with the sizzle of burgers on a grill. I've always loved those late afternoons, where the sky softens into a faded orange, and the world just feels right. My name is Alex, and I live in a small town where every summer, gatherings happen like clockwork. Neighbors spill into backyards, children run barefoot through sprinklers, and hearty laughter dances between the trees. A couple of weekends ago, I found myself standing at the edge of our friend Jamie's sprawling lawn, surrounded by the familiar cacophony of voices, the warmth of good company wrapping around me like a comforter. Jamie is one of those natural hosts, the kind who can turn simple gatherings into celebrations filled with joy and laughter. Yet, every time, there's an unspoken rule that I sometimes tread carefully around, an expectation about food particularly. You see, I have always been a bit of an oddity in my circle. While everyone else eagerly embraces the traditional barbecue items, I've found solace in fresh, vibrant meals that speak to my personal taste and dietary choices. So, me being me, I decided to bring my own colorful quinoa salad, sprinkled with chunks of avocado and a medley of cherry tomatoes that glisten like little jewels. I thought it would be a delightful addition, maybe I could even share it, brighten up a plate or two amid the burgers and hot dogs. But as I set my dish down, it felt like time slowed. Conversations around me paused, laughter faded, and I could almost hear the collective holding of breath as the grill crackled and popped. What I intended as a simple gesture of nourishment took on a completely different tone in that moment, one that caught me off guard. I was met not with the understanding I had hoped for, but rather, an undercurrent of judgment that lingered in the air like a thick mist. In that moment, with the warm glow of the sun fading and the stars dusting the sky, I couldn't shake off the feeling. I felt disrespected. Or at least, that's how it seemed. Just a salad, I thought, the soft breeze brushing against my skin as I stood among friends, longing to feel understood and accepted. Perhaps I would soon learn that intentions don't always translate into understanding, especially when it comes to food, and the emotional ties it carries. As I arrived at the barbecue, the scent of smoke wafted through the air, weaving around me in a way that felt like a warm embrace. Friends chatted and laughed, their voices bubbling up like the sodas fizzing in crisp cans. I could see the grill sizzling with burgers and hot dogs, the centerpiece drawing everyone in like moths to a flame. It was one of those picturesque summer evenings where the laughter felt endless, and the sun dipped just low enough to cast everything in a soft, golden hue. I had spent the morning preparing a vibrant, colorful salad, mixed greens, cherry tomatoes bursting with sweetness, creamy avocado, and a light vinaigrette that sang with zest. It wasn't just food to me, it was a piece of myself, an offering of care wrapped in vibrant colors. I thought it would be a nice addition to the table, perhaps even something unexpected in a sea of burgers and brats. Walking up, I felt optimistic, excited even, until I noticed the way my contribution was met with sideways glances and furrowed brows. As I set the bowl down next to the towering stack of meat, I watched a few faces shift, their smiles faltering like candles threatened by an unfriendly draft. My friend Jake chuckled lightly, but it wasn't a friendly tease. There was something sharp behind his laughter, a jab that pierced through my heart. "You brought a salad? Guess you're really watching your figure, huh?" It felt like a freeze-frame moment, the laughter around me fading into a dull hum. My heart sank. Here I was, hoping to share something nourishing and delightfully different, and instead, I felt the chill of judgment wrap around me. I didn't want to be the health nut at a barbecue, I craved connection, to be part of the communal joy that came with savory bites and simple conversations. The air turned slightly cooler, or maybe it was just me suddenly cold inside, as I felt the weight of unspoken assumptions hanging like a heavy fog. I stammered a half-hearted reply, hoping to deflect the awkwardness, but the warmth of the moment slipped away, leaving behind a faint echo of laughter that no longer included me. The salad, so vibrant and full of potential, felt like a burden now, as if it would always symbolize this moment of disconnect, the moment I realized that sometimes, our good intentions aren't received as we hope, and instead, create rifts we didn't foresee. In the days that followed, I found myself replaying the barbecue incident in my mind like a broken record. Every time a friend texted or called to catch up, I hesitated. My mind wrestled with that moment, the disapproving glances, the whispers that rode the breeze just beside the sizzling hamburgers. Was I disrespectful? I didn't think so, but the thoughts crept in, whispering doubts that tucked themselves into the corners of my mind. I tried to distract myself with little things that once brought me joy. I lit a candle at my kitchen table, the gentle flicker always having a way of calming my spirit. But even this small ritual felt off. I stared at the flame, wondering if it would burn away the feelings swelling inside me. I closed my eyes and tried to breathe, but that nagging sense of isolation stayed like a stubborn shadow. I started to notice how my daily routine began to shift in subtle ways. I would prepare my lunch while staring out of the window, wishing for the vibrant dialogues of my coworkers that I had once relished. I packed my healthy quinoa salad, fully aware that it felt like a mask, like a way to shield myself from the ridicule I believed was lurking everywhere. I watched as others brought their leftovers from the weekend barbecue, laughter spilling over like the ranch dressing they used, effortlessly connecting over culinary mishaps and sweat-soaked fun. Yet there I was, quietly measuring out my portions, feeling like I was on the outside of a glass wall. My mind began to traverse the notion that maybe they truly thought I was that person now, always bringing the salad, always opting for the healthier choice. I yearned for authenticity, for moments where acceptance bloomed over sizzling hot dogs. Slowly, feelings of self-imposed exile blossomed into a reluctance to engage. I thought, why put myself in the line of fire again? Every barbecue was now a tug-of-war with my sense of belonging. Invites were met with a mix of anticipation and dread, and sometimes I would even convince myself to decline, blaming my schedule or claiming I had other plans. Each excuse felt like a tiny triumph over the anticipated discomfort, but deep down, I knew I was unraveling the very fabric that had once stitched me tightly into this community. One afternoon, while scrolling through social media, I came across a picture from that very barbecue. Smiling faces, grilled meats piled high, and beside it, my salad, so bright and almost naive in the sea of jubilant indulgence. I felt a swell of longing, but also a twinge of sadness. It highlighted the divide that had formed, one created not by the food itself but by my perceived inconsideration. I took a moment to gaze at the image, allowing it to wash over me. I realized I could either cling to that moment of despair or seek a way to bridge the gap, perhaps with my newfound resolve to embrace my choices, to simply share my intentions rather than hiding behind the salad. It became clear to me that the rift wasn't solely theirs, it was in part how I had chosen to perceive it all. Maybe it was time for a different approach. Could I find a way to explain my food choices without feeling defensive? Maybe invite them into the exploration of what healthy eating could look like? As I stirred my lunch that day, infused with renewed determination, I found myself softly smiling. The salad, once a symbol of my isolation, suddenly transformed into a representation of my self-care, a choice I valued and embraced, while still feeling the pull to connect with my community. I took a deep breath. Perhaps it was time to extend that invitation. To find peace not by isolating myself further, but by inviting connection wrapped in understanding. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting soft golden hues across my kitchen, I felt a wave of clarity wash over me. I leaned against the counter, the remnants of lunch still scattered around, and let my thoughts wander. Initially, I had worn my choice to bring my own food like a shield, a misguided effort to protect myself from judgment. But now, I was beginning to see how skewed that view truly was. Sure, there had been frustration in my heart when I chose to bring a salad to the barbecue. I had seen it as a rejection of the very essence of community, a plate of food laden with unspoken expectations. But in this moment of quiet reflection, I realized I was missing a crucial piece of the puzzle. It wasn't just about my preferences, it was about how I had framed those preferences in the minds of others. Suddenly, my salad felt less like an act of defiance and more like an invitation, an opportunity to share a part of myself in my journey toward a healthier life. Perhaps rather than seeing my choices as walls, they could become bridges. This wasn't just about food, it was about connection and compassion, both toward myself and those around me. Could I have approached the situation differently? Sure. Communication is a delicate dance, and I often tripped over my own feet. But I wasn't just a lone figure at the barbecue anymore. I was someone with experiences and intentions worth sharing, and maybe others were looking for the same courage to be open. I could picture it, sitting around the grill, laughter mixing with the scent of charred burgers in the air, a gathering fueled by stories as much as by food. If I invited them in, perhaps they'd share their own struggles, their own choices, and we'd come to understand one another a little better. As I packed up my lunch remnants, the weight of quiet resentment slowly lifted. Instead of perceiving disdain in their eyes, I could embrace curiosity about our shared humanity. A rich tapestry woven from different threads, where every choice could be a shared journey rather than a sign of disrespect. Yes, I was different, but being different didn't mean I had to walk alone. So, amidst the laughter and chatter of future gatherings, I pictured my plate not as a solitary salad but as a vibrant centerpiece, an offering to engage, not just to exist. Perhaps it was time to truly invite others in, not just to witness my choices, but to include them in this beautiful, messy adventure called life. As I stood under the warm glow of the setting sun, the last of the barbecue smoke trailing off into the brightening sky, I felt a shift deep within me, like a heavy curtain drawing back to reveal the light. It was strange at first, this awakening. There was still laughter in the air, and the vibrant notes of conversation ebbed like a soft tide around me. But instead of being a ghost hovering on the edges of their joy, I found a sense of calm wrapping around me instead. While I packed my reusable container, I caught the eye of Mia, one of the organizers, who was busy creating a summery fruit salad. She smiled at me, genuine and warm, and in that moment, I felt something crack open, a willingness to embrace whatever came next. I realized that my heart was no longer weighed down by the fear of being misunderstood. So, I took a deep breath and made a quiet decision. I walked over to her, my heart fluttering ever so slightly. "Hey, would you want me to bring some of my roasted veggies to share next time? I could even throw in a special dressing," I offered, my voice steady though I felt a tingle of vulnerability coursing through me. Mia's eyes lit up, and she nodded enthusiastically. "That sounds amazing. We could all use something a bit different." In that exchange, something clicked. It wasn't just about the food, it was about inclusion, about connection. Instead of feeling like the outsider known for my disrespectful meal choices, I was opening the door to interaction, to sharing not only my food but a part of myself. As I stepped away, the air felt lighter around me. I could almost hear the collective heartbeat of our gathering, everyone sharing bits of their world through flavors, stories, and laughter. I looked back at the group, who were now tossing around ideas for the next gathering, each suggestion a beautiful note in our collective symphony. Instead of feeling like I was on the outside, peering in, I realized I was simply on a different path, one that could intertwine with theirs, creating a new melody altogether. That evening, I collected my things, not as a symbol of leaving but as an invitation for what was to come. I felt a quiet resolution wash over me, a warm embrace of understanding that I belonged, perhaps tentatively at first, but fully nonetheless. I stepped into my own skin and, for the first time, felt the joy of being part of something larger. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden hue across the backyard, I felt a change in the air, like the gentle breeze ushering in a new chapter. I packed my things, not out of shame but with a sense of purpose. My homemade dish, once a source of friction, had become something different, a bridge to understanding. The host approached me as the night wore on, her laughter ringing like chimes in the cool evening air. "I never thought about it that way," she said, eyeing the colorful spread on the table. "You really brought something special today." Her words flowed around me like the warm light spilling from the patio string lights above. It was then I understood, it wasn't so much about the food I had brought, but what it represented, a new perspective, a little piece of my heart shared with others. Gradually, as the evening pressed on, the conversations deepened. People began to tell stories not just about their dishes but about the emotions and memories those flavors conjured up. I joined in, sharing the memories tied to the dish I had brought, a family recipe, layered with nostalgia and love. When I spoke, I noticed heads nodding, eyes sparkling with intrigue, and suddenly I wasn't just a quiet presence, I was part of the unfolding narrative, like an unexpected harmony that enriches a song. By the time the stars scattered across the night sky, what began as defensiveness had transformed into acceptance. Others approached me, curious about my culinary tradition. We exchanged laughs, recipes, and anecdotes, crafting a shared experience that layered our own individual narratives into a richer tapestry. The host suggested we create a potluck tradition moving forward, where everyone would bring something that reflected their heritage or personal story. I felt the flutter of excitement in my chest at the thought of future connections forged over food, laughter, and the blending of cultures. As I made my way to the car, I turned back to look at the warm glow spilling from the backyard. It was no longer intimidating but filled with warmth and promise. In a way, I had brought more than just a dish, I had invited an opportunity for newfound connection, weaving my melody into the beautiful concert of their gathering. That evening, I learned a simple yet profound truth: there's beauty in being different, an invitation to create unity in diversity. And as I drove away, I felt not just a part of something, but a spaciousness around me, cradled by acceptance and the sweet, soft possibility of what could come next. Final thought: sometimes, it's in our differences where we find the most warmth, reminding us that true connection blooms when we embrace what makes us unique. Life's most delightful moments often arise from daring to share our true selves.